Well, who could have expected this? I have been very vocal about my opinions on the live action Disney remakes. The majority of them just don't impress me. I didn't even bother with the most recent one, Peter Pan and Wendy. But I have enjoyed some like Cinderella or even Beauty and the Beast. But the majority have seemed to almost spit in the face of what the original was, whether that be the concept of the original or even the core of the original story. Growing up, my favorite Disney movies I constantly watched over and over and over again. Pinocchio, Hercules, Beauty and the Beast, The Little Mermaid. So when Pinocchio's live action remake came out and was
Chad Log? I've got it. Chris Pine.
for lack of better terms, pathetic, all of my excitement for The Little Mermaid that was coming out just died with it. But this year I actually joined a really cool membership program called AMC A-Stubs. Basically, you pay $20 a month and you're able to see up to 3 movies a week for free. So I decided last week, why not give The Little Mermaid a chance? It seemed like for the majority of it was getting mixed reviews. Some calling it good, some calling it the worst thing ever. So, who knows, it could have been good or bad in my opinion. I've seen it twice now. Both times I just had this stupid smile on my face the whole time. I loved this movie. Now, it's not a perfect movie, but it is one of their best live-action interpretations in my opinion. This is not a Pinocchio or a Maleficent or a Dumbo, where they trample on what the original was, nor is it a boring shot-for-shot remake like The Lion King was. For me, I would place this movie slightly below Beauty and the Beast, but slightly above Cinderella. It gets a lot right in my opinion. But to start with, let's get the bad out of the way in my opinion. I think the part of the movie from when Ursula turns into her alternate human self Vanessa to her dying was very poorly implemented. It felt so out of left field from what the movie was setting up. It almost felt like a completely different movie, which is weird to say. There was also this massive drop-off in CGI that you just could tell. It went from having this Lion King-like quality to all of a sudden a Disney Plus production. There's just no way to really describe that. There is also this terrible song that Scuttle sings in it. I don't know how this got past songwriters and song mixers and audio people and the directors and the people and the heads in Disney. How did this get past them?
Be like, why would I drop that scuttlebutt? Okay, now huddle up, buttercup, from the women who washed all the clothes.
They took a look at that and said, yeah, this is good. While there's so much of this movie that is built up very slowly, in my opinion, and I like that, it felt like just the part when Ursula becomes a human and to her dying was done so quickly. If I had to guess, probably that portion of the movie was only 15 minutes in length. And this is what keeps the movie from being the best live-action remake, in my opinion. If they had nailed this 15 minutes or even cut out that Scuttle song, I would have been singing this movie its praises. I would have been able to say this is the best live-action remake that Disney's ever put out. But thankfully, once Ursula does die, the movie's CGI quality jumps up again, as well as its storytelling. I thought they stuck the landing perfectly. I don't know what it is. Just that 15 minutes from when Ursula becomes a human to her dying is done terribly. It's like a different director came in all of a sudden and started changing up the project. But that's all that I disliked about this movie. I thought that the way that they remade the old scenes that were pretty much shot-for-shot remakes of what the original was handled very well. It wasn't done in a boring way like The Lion King was. And even the new scenes, I felt, didn't feel tacked on, or where all of a sudden the director wanted to come in and do his own version of what The Little Mermaid was. It just added a lot to the story, in my opinion. It didn't feel forced. For instance, one thing that I really enjoy about this is that there's a slow build-up to Ariel and Eric's relationship throughout the entire movie. About half of the movie is this. And honestly, I think this goes into my point about the actors. Halle Bailey is adorable as Ariel. I thought she did a fine job, and honestly, she shone the brightest when she was turned into a human. Because at that point, that's when you had to play Ariel without a voice. She did great with her facial expressions and how she was excited over every little possible detail. I think you needed an actor that really nailed this part of the movie, because in the original, Ariel is a very expressive cartoon character. So I think those moments that transferred from the cartoon to the live action worked the best. When she sings too, it's very beautiful. While her rendition of Part of Your World felt weird the first time I watched it, the second time I absolutely loved it. It's pitched up just slightly. So that's what threw me off the first time.
Look at this stuff. Isn't it neat?
Look at this stuff. Isn't it neat?
But I did ended up liking it the second time through. I also like this other song that she sings in the middle of it, where it's all in her head. I think it's a cool idea to have some of her emotions portrayed this way. Prince Eric is played by a nobody, Jonah Hauer-King. I thought he did actually a pretty nice job. I like that they changed up his character a little bit more, where he's drawn to the sea now, while Ariel is drawn to the land. There's a nice tug and pull feel to that dynamic there. I think that also the relationship feels believable like in the original. It was nice to see a slow build-up of it throughout here. Probably my favorite two scenes are when Ariel and Eric are interacting the most. The first one is when Eric is showing off Ariel his collection of trinkets and sorts, and they're just bonding over maps. Also the next day, once Eric is showing Ariel around the island, she gets lost in this market and she's just exploring the market of all these new things that are new to the human world to her. Probably one of the most surprising performances out of this entire movie that I hear nobody talking about is Grimsby. In the original, he's played as one of the more funny characters. But in this one, he's played pretty straight with a few laughs throughout. I also like here that you get to see how much Grimsby really cares for Eric here. He doesn't seem like a burden to Eric like the original did. I don't know, I really liked how they portrayed Grimsby here and how he was played. I had no idea that out of all the people that could have played Ursula, it was Melissa McCarthy. I was shocked at how well she played Ursula. Her voice sounded exactly like the original at times. Melissa portrayed the voice exactly like the original, where her voice would flow up and it would flow down, just like in the original. Her rendition of Poor Unfortunate Soul, too, was actually really good in my opinion.
Poor unfortunate souls.
Unfortunate souls.
Let's talk about the CGI though for a minute. Usually in movies, when you're trying to portray someone underwater, it's never really looked good in my opinion. Usually the two movies that I think of are Aquaman and Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Those two movies, while the graphics you could argue are good, they just looked off in my opinion and unusual. But here, I thought Disney actually nailed the look of what it would be like to live underwater. First of all, I think they did the best thing, which was not to make it realistic. For instance, the world is very colorful and full of life, especially during the under the sea moment. I'm saddened that the animals didn't play instruments. But I actually like what they did here. They had it where the animals could make those musical instrument noises through their own noises that the animals would make themselves. I don't know, I thought Under the Sea was handled with a lot of care, and it just had me grinning from ear to ear the whole entire time. Listen, I'm all for Disney to come back and do some original ideas and to stop rehashing the same thing and to keep doing these live action remakes and all these sequels to all their legacy titles. Overall, it just felt like they cared about this movie, and they wanted to do the original film justice. There was just a few of those choices that I thought were questionable. Overall, I had a really good time with The Little Mermaid. This is not a Maleficent or a Dumbo or a Pinocchio where they just take everything and they're like, forget it, let's make our own interpretation of the story. I thought The Little Mermaid was a wonderful retelling of Disney's classic. Trust me, when I say I'm the one who could have disliked this the most. This could have easily turned into Pinocchio for me. I mean, even when I was little, I met Ariel and all the other Disney princesses because I loved them so much. I even got a kiss from Ariel. Is that too embarrassing to put on the internet?
So recently I've been ordered to apologize for my most recent rant on a topic that nobody really remembered.
What even is an Makela charger?
So I thought we could talk about one of the most popular forms of media nowadays. let's talk about this. Anime. The thing that you either get or you look at and go,
What?
Anime is one of those forms of media that has an entire library of content that people could easily overlook. Its use of style, drama, music, characters, and story is something that is definitely unique to anime. Recently, the genre has actually picked up, with a lot of people actually willing to try it out. So, I thought that we could take a minute to look at some titles that I personally recommend. This isn't necessarily a top 10 list, more so just a list of random titles that I feel get overlooked. I will be including both series and movies.
Kayo Hinazuki.
A series that I hear no one talking about is Erased. This has a very strong start to the show. Once you watch episode 1, you will be hooked and want to know what happens next. The story is basically that a man has the ability to time jump. He can't control it happening or for how long it happens. That makes for a really interesting hook in my opinion. And after you see how it ends for episode 1, you're just going to want to know what happens next. The animation is extremely well done. Most animation in anime is well done, but for Erased, it just takes its time in my opinion. There's not these complex swooping shots that can make your head spin. I walked into this series not knowing anything or having heard anything about it, and I walked out with it being one of my top 20. If honestly you haven't watched anime or want a good place to start, I recommend you do so here. It's a good start to seeing how Japanese animation differs so much from American animation. One thing that a lot seem to forget about is that Nintendo properties received more adaptations than people seem to realize. Everyone knows Pokemon and the new Mario movie, but no one talks about how there was an Animal Crossing movie, or even that Donkey Kong show. But out of all of them, probably the best was Kirby. Kirby Right Back At Ya is a show I discovered on the Kirby's Dream Collection back on the Wii. It included 3 episodes on the disc. This was always a blast to watch, with not only its catchy jazz intro, but its loyalty to the source material. I don't think this is a show that someone would easily enjoy if they didn't know Kirby or had played the games, but if you're a fan of Kirby or the games or anything related to Kirby, there is a lot of love poured into this show. From the characters, the villains, or anytime Kirby even uses one of his copy abilities, it's done with this grand spectacle vibe to it.
Right back at ya.
I don't think any recommendations list can be complete without Studio Ghibli. Having been established in 1985, almost every single one of their films has been celebrated and praised by critics and fans alike. Except for you. A lot of their success can be attributed to one of their many directors, Hayao Miyazaki. The guy is 82 years old now, and he's still directing, with one of his newest films, How Do You Live, being his last. A lot of people point to Spirited Away as being their favorite. And while it truly is a piece of work, honestly, the one that I can't recommend enough is his third film, Castle in the Sky. Castle in the Sky is this great starting point for those interested in Studio Ghibli. Its American dub is really well done, with a ton of famous voices like Anna Paquin, Mark Hamill, and even Jim Cummings. You never really can go wrong with a movie from Studio Ghibli, but Castle in the Sky for me has one of the best stories told from them. It's well-paced, the characters are memorable, and extremely funny at times. This is the title that got me checking out all of their other movies, especially in regards to its animation. There's a lot where the paintings and the scenery are absolutely gorgeous. Castle in the Sky is just a well-done, well-rounded movie that will get you interested in Studio Ghibli's other works as well. I can't recommend it enough. Redline is one of the most impressively made, hand-drawn animated movies, period. It took 7 years to make this. There was over 100,000 hand-drawn frames of animation in this. This movie is made for people who love Fast and the Furious and Speed Racer. It's one of those movies as well that has gained a cult following over time. It's just a movie that has everything in it. Giant monsters, over-the-top races, all sorts of different species. Just having a shot like this makes the 7 years of development pay off. Not a second of animation is wasted here. Redline is something that nobody talks about, and it's a shame. Definitely give this movie a try.
Red line!
Cowboy Bebop is the greatest anime ever made, period. It's my second favorite personally though, but as in terms of its story being told, it's a 10 out of 10. I prefer more episodic stories told as well. And while there's a hint of a greater story arc here, it's pushed to the background until the end mostly. So every episode here is just focusing on one story, or how these characters get thrown into a situation because of the bounty. I recommend this to those who like The Mandalorian or Westerns. You're really going to appreciate this. It's only one season, so you're in and out. Its cast of characters are so iconic that they are still being celebrated today. If anime as a whole had a Super Smash Bros. Video game, Spike Spiegel is Mario basically. He is that influential. This is just another great place to start for those who just don't get anime or wonder where to even start. I cannot praise Cowboy Bebop enough. Steam Boy is a long-forgotten movie from the director of Akira. I discovered this movie all the way back when Godzilla Final Wars came out in 2004. It was one of the movies that was teased in its trailers for the DVD. While not the greatest movie, it's severely underrated and hardly talked about. Its setting is really well done with this attention to 19th century detail, with steam being its main power for everything. Its soundtrack and art and character designs are incredible. There's this massive swooping shots and these big complex objects that have so much detail. While its animation isn't as impressive as Redline in my opinion, this movie reminds me of the simpler stories told back in the 50s or the 60s with anime. Steam Boy is a movie you can find very cheap. Like I said, nobody talks about this movie. It's strangely been lost to time, it feels like. It's never really solidified itself as much as its director's other movies, Akira has. I think it could gain a cult following. It just needs to be discussed more. But Steam Boy is just one of those other movies you could easily get into without knowing anything about anime or animation in general. Komi Can't Communicate is a slice-of-life anime with comedy thrown in throughout. It's mostly about a guy named Tadano helping out a girl named Komi make 100 friends. The only bad thing is that she has crippling social anxiety. A lot of the humor stems from the wacky situations and the crazy faces that the characters make. Komi has excellent animation too. I love that specifically in this, the characters are a lot more cartoony than most, with realistic backgrounds thrown in throughout. Also, the OST is excellent. Komi is the show that made me check out other genres in anime like romance, slice of life, and even comedy. These are genres not to look over. Some of the best anime shows come from these, and Komi is definitely one of them. I think a lot of people don't realize that Voltron is an American version of a Japanese anime, Beast King Go Lion. Beast King Go Lion is an excellent, classic episodic anime with a lot of twists and turns that you will not see coming. If you've watched Voltron, this is an entirely different animal. The story and how it ends, to even the characters, are extremely different. Definitely give this a watch if you have already breezed through Voltron. Speaking of classics, anime like Lupin the Third, Astro Boy, and Sailor Moon are usually what pop into people's minds as classic staples in the genre. And they're right. But out of all of them, Speed Racer takes the cake. Its animation and even its American dub is not the best, but that's where a lot of its charm comes from. Also, Speed Racer's overacting to the way he murders everybody on the track, it all feels cheesy, but with it, it has some of the most recognizable characters. Speed Racer isn't for everyone, but it was one that I grew up with like Voltron, so leaving it out of my recommendations would be spitting in the face of 8-year-old me. Megalobox has one of the best and strongest stories told in anime. It's basically Rocky mixed with real steel. The way people match up in the ring are with these weird things called gears. But our main character goes in without gear. Gearless Joe is an interesting character just going through life till the opportunity is thrusted upon him to compete at the tournament level. Season 1 is more like Rocky 1, while Season 2 is more like Rocky 4 almost. The boxing matches are brutal and are animated amazingly. They're chaotic, but they're not confusing. Season 1's ending is also pretty nail-biting and got me so excited to see how it would play out. Definitely give Megalobox a chance. Anime is one of those genres in film and television that there are so much content out there to ingest that you could talk about this all day. These are just a few of the television shows and movies that I personally enjoyed over the years. Now, is there anything that I'm missing?
Wealth, fame, power. Gold Roger, the king of...
Should I ever get in a plane again? Spiders? I wonder if I could survive. What if there's no electricity? Elephants? Coconuts? It's not like it's a possibility anyway, long as I just don't fly. That could have been me. I need to make sure I'm prepared. Which one of you do I take? So you're on an island stranded. What do you do? How do I open you? Well, there's nothing better to do. Let's choose some games to play. I remember this being a question in the Wimpy Kid Do-It-Yourself book. Theoretically, if you had a TV, consoles, electricity, considering that all cards are on the table, no limits, you have internet, at that point, why even leave the house? Here are my 5 games I would bring stranded. This isn't a top 5 list, more so recommendations. I have a passion for old PC computer games. Warcraft, StarCraft, Fate, Star Wars. But out of all of them, Roller Coaster Tycoon is my favorite. It's one of those games where it's all about the gameplay. No story, no overly explained tutorials, no talking, just game. It's fairly simple but can get very challenging. Some missions you might have to create a busying park from nothing or get a park out of debt. It's an incredibly satisfying game. You get to see your physical park brought to life. I love the scenarios where you make everything. It starts off as quiet and tranquil to... This is a game I will never get tired of playing. Your choices vary dramatically where you place objects or what rides you create or delete. You can get very creative too with some of the rides and the scenery as well. These are some of the rides that I've made, but others are just as cool and detailed. Roller Coaster Tycoon is a never-ending game that I have consistently gone back to over the last 15 years. If you add the DLC as well, Roller Coaster Tycoon is a game you can put well over 1,000 hours into. There's plenty of content to last me on the island. Few games are as crazy and over the top as the Twisted Metal series. Being PlayStation's longest running first-party series, Twisted Metal is one of the simplest but most addictive games to play. Basically cars and machine guns. Now go turn the competition into roadkill. Everyone has their favorite game in the series, but arguably the best is Twisted Metal 2 World Tour. Twisted Metal 2 is one of those rare sequels that dramatically improved everything. Better cars, controls, music, stages, graphics, everything was practically improved for the better here. Single player wise, Twisted Metal 2 is fantastic. You pick from a group of crazed maniacs, whether it be a 150-year-old war veteran, a man morphed between 2 death wheels, or even the Grim Reaper himself. All of the characters are interesting and awesome. Each car as well has a special power, whether it be a boomerang, a flamethrower, or chompers. The gameplay is so addictive here, and it never gets old for me. Like Roller Coaster Tycoon, this is another game I've played consistently over the last 15 years. Now single player, Twisted Metal 2 is great, but multiplayer, this is one of the best split screen games of all time. Now if I'm stranded with a friend, perfect, but the game is still so much fun and you can get a ton of play hours out of it. RPGs are one of my favorite genres, period. Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Ni no Kuni. These are always a blast to play, but arguably one of my favorite is Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. This is one of my favorite games of all time. I have played this game every year since I bought it nearly 15 years ago. This game is in dire need of a re-release because, oh boy, this is a rare RPG where everything mashes perfectly. The writing is funny and witty with an easy to understand gameplay. You learn that contact lenses are canon to the Mario universe. You take a balloon to a wrestling match and fight a bird that reminds me of the Hulkster. You help the guys from Sunshine who are the Mafia in Rogueport. There's a noose in Town Square. Wait. Thousand Year Door is fantastic with so many different memorable characters and story beats. The puzzles and the mysteries you solve are not extremely difficult, but there is a level of thought here that does make you scratch your head every once in a while. Even though it's linear in format compared to the last two games, there is so much content packed on the disc. Now, Nintendo, remaster it. One of my favorite story-based games is 2010's Epic Mickey. Mickey Mouse is one of the most iconic movie mascots, period. But over the years, his games have been hit or miss. Epic Mickey rectified all the bad ones though, with one of the most interesting stories told. I love the dark, twisted atmosphere of Wasteland. Being a massive Disney fan, seeing a mirrored version of the castle, Toontown, or even Pirates of the Caribbean is awesome. Yes, the game does have its issues, but the positives have always outweighed the negative. The controls are fluid, especially when aiming because of the Wii's motion controls. The ability to paint the town back to order and fix Wasteland or destroy and become the villain is an awesome concept. I'm going to go more in depth in a later video, but Epic Mickey is a game that I have religiously played every year to 100% since launch. I cannot praise this game enough. One of the most replayable games of all time. Guitar Hero 3 has one of the best song lineups in history. Slow Ride, Paint It Black, Welcome to the Jungle, and obviously Through the Fire and the Flames. There's something so satisfying to have a fake guitar playing real music. What more do I say? The replay value here is so high where it's almost impossible to play on an expert right away. But over time, you get more skilled with how the fretboard works and how fast your fingers can move. The best way to play this is to grab a headset and crank the volume all the way as you jam out. 2013 was a wacky year in the movie business. There were heavy hitters like Man of Steel or even The Hobbit Part 2, but not a ton went down as great or highly memorable. The best film of that year, Pacific Rim, barely turned a profit. A lot of the best movies were the smaller budgeted ones like Grudge Match, 42, Saving Mr. Banks, and Captain Phillips. But by far, my second favorite that year was The Lone Ranger. The Lone Ranger is a movie not talked about in recent years due to how poor it was received by both critics and fans. Generally, the only reason it's brought up now is because of how much money it lost Disney. Over $190 million.
It's not about money, it's about sending a message.
But that being said, I don't understand how this movie was met with nearly nobody liking it. This is a very exciting and action-packed movie with great laughs thrown in throughout the runtime.
Something very wrong with that horse.
I'm not saying it's a perfect movie, but it's by no means bad. There's a lot of great stuff in here.
Where'd you get that?
Make trade.
With a dead man?
Hard bargain.
So let's break down one of the biggest and the most expensive bombs in Hollywood history. In 1998, one of the most successful movies of the year was released, The Mask of Zorro. With successful filmmakers like Martin Campbell, Steven Spielberg, and even Robert Rodriguez all contributing to make something that brought back the classic feelings of a swashbuckling hero. No wonder The Mask of Zorro made over $250 million at the box office. This was the perfect opportunity to get a classic duo back on the big screen. The Lone Ranger is usually regarded and remembered for its early radio and television show, as well as its spin-off, The Green Hornet. Not a whole lot of people remember there was a movie in the 1980s to try and jumpstart the series with a new coat of paint after successes like Superman in 1978. Even though the budget for The Legend of the Lone Ranger was a small 13 to 18 million, it failed to capture an audience and make a profit. With that being said, there were attempts to get the duo back on the screen little by little after this, The Mask of Zorro being the push to finally get a new movie made. Originally, it was Columbia Pictures that was going to develop the film with Classic Media, who owned the rights at the time. But while the budget was set and people were hired, the movie was set to be stupid. For starters, one big change was that Tonto was going to be rewritten as a female love interest, instead of the trusty sidekick that he's always been. The director hired in 2005 was Jonathan Mazdo, who would have been coming off of Terminator 3. With the film though, like prior attempts, the movie was put into a turnaround and was in a development crisis and could not get going. Due to its troubles and potential other buyers interested in the property, the movie was never made and deals fell through. Eventually, however, the company Entertainment Rights optioned the property and teamed up with successful producer Jerry Bruckheimer. Jerry Bruckheimer is one of the most successful producers in Hollywood, having an impressive back catalog like Top Gun, Days of Thunder, and both Beverly Hills Cop movies. But his partnership with Disney was incredible in the late 90s and the early 2000s. He brought them movies like The Rock, Armageddon, Remember the Titans, and Pearl Harbor, but none of them are as highly memorable or recognizable as the Pirates of the Caribbean. Pirates of the Caribbean was a smash hit that needs no introduction. It really built an even better relationship between Bruckheimer and Disney. Around this time, however, when the second and the third Pirates film was being made, that's when Entertainment Rights and Bruckheimer teamed up to bring the Lone Ranger back to the silver screen, and they brought that property over to Disney. When the film was still in its early development, the title was just going to be Lone Ranger, and it had a sick teaser logo. In 2008, once the second and the third Pirates films had been released, the writer of those films, Ted Elliott and Terry Rosso, were in final negotiations to write The Lone Ranger. And in a few months in September, it was announced that Johnny Depp was the one that be cast as Tonto.
But why is the rum gone?
The original script that Ted and Terry wrote was pretty interesting in my opinion. It was opting for more of a Pirates of the Caribbean supernatural tone. It even had werewolves as a plot element. While some of the supernaturalness came through in the final movie, it had a lot rewritten by Justin Hayeth, cutting the werewolf plot entirely. But now we come to the delays. This movie was originally going to film earlier, but the movie didn't have a director for the longest time. Names like Mike Newell were thrown around, but due to him working on Prince of Persia, they wanted to wait. Finally though, Gore Verbinski was hired to direct in 2010, which I think it's perfect. He had experience directing big budget blockbusters for Disney, with the 3 Pirates films and even the Western genre with the excellent film Rango. This is when the movie seemed like it was going to start filming. They even cast the lead, Armie Hammer, as the Lone Ranger, which is a great pick in my opinion. First, at this point, he was basically a no-name actor. He was in movies, but not blockbusters yet. I'm always for casting no-names or smaller actors for lead roles, because you can see the character more than the famous actor. Armie Hammer has a great look to him as well. Bruckheimer describes the role of the Lone Ranger as a Jimmy Stewart character. And whether he's in costume or not, Armie Hammer is the Lone Ranger. But now with all the casting being done and everything behind the scenes finally looking to start taking shape, now the movie could finally... Yeah, the movie was aiming for a 2011 production start date, but budget concerns caused the movie to be reevaluated. That's a big red flag. How much bigger was the budget originally? We're talking about a movie that had over a $250 million budget. What was it, $350 million? That's ridiculous for a Western. But finally, after a few budget reworkings, the movie finally started filming on March 8, 2012. The Lone Ranger, as established, had a hard hill to climb, but it was only halfway there. The production of The Lone Ranger had several problems. Their filming locations spanned across nearly 6 states, and because of that, weather was a massive problem that set them back. The Lone Ranger practically had every issue a film's production could have, from the weather, wildfires, a chickenpox outbreak, and even the death of a crew member. Michael Bridger died while he was cleaning out a pool in his scuba gear. There's a lot of conflicting reports about how he died. Most say that it was a heart attack, while others say that he drowned. So it was probably a mix of it, if I had to guess. He probably had a heart attack and then drowned because of it. And because of this, the Associated Press stated that Disney has the highest fine paid for an on-set incident. So you can see how this movie had issue after issue, even before releasing. I actually remember being excited for the movie. They were showing off the images of Tonto and the Lone Ranger. I thought it looked awesome. I remember my dad would always come back from work telling me about the production, or hey, there's a new trailer out. But finally, after all the delays from set issues and production troubles, The Lone Ranger released on July 4th, 2013. And what did I think of it?
I didn't see it.
Yeah, I don't remember why we didn't see it in the theater. Maybe we were busy, or we just were thinking it was going to be bad due to the reviews, and also, Disney had been on a slew of bad movies recently. Remember Oz? But we didn't contribute to seeing it. But man, this movie got destroyed. Even the audience score is wild. Most people complained about the length or how it was a disservice to the original. And I don't agree. The origins of the Lone Ranger are here. The villains adhere to the rules of how they're supposed to be portrayed, as well as the Lone Ranger himself. One way they promoted the movie was by releasing the Lone Ranger Disney Infinity playset. This was really fun, and it was always a blast to set up. My favorite playset was always the Pirates one, but this was right behind it. We're going to get into that in another video, but this is just one way that they promoted it, alongside with Legos and other toys. Even though The Lone Ranger is labeled as a box office bomb, the movie still made a great box office return. It just didn't make a profit because of the ridiculous budget. If the budget was a small $50 million or even $20 million, the movie would have done good. The movie is the third highest grossing Western. $260 million is nothing to shake a finger at, but when your budget is this big, yeah, it lost money. So what do I think about the movie? Well, I adore this movie. I think it has its issues, and I want to get those out of the way first. I think the old Tonto parts could have been edited out. They're not bad, but they really add nothing to the core of the story, other than perhaps old Tonto is exaggerating things in the story to explain the more ridiculous moments. I also think the movie is extremely dark at moments that are just not necessary. Sure, the cannibal villain is interesting, but that's all that's really interesting about him. You could have cut that out in my opinion, while propping up the secondary villain more. I think also the dark moments don't mesh with the more light, humorous moments. One minute we're up to silly antics to a massacre. The love plot is a mixed bag. I just don't believe that the actors had chemistry here. The movie is a bit all over the place at times. These aren't movie-breaking issues for me though. These are mostly problems that could be solved in a quick edit. But that being said, the great stuff is awesome. I can't believe people thought that this was boring. This is an exciting and well-edited action movie. I can't stand when action is shaky, zoomed in, and it's just all over the place. The Lone Ranger has faraway shots and no shaky camera. The train scene at the end has probably the most exciting ends to a movie in my opinion. I think that the movie has some great emotional moments, like when Tonto sees the dead tribe in the water and then picks up his bird. The scene has no talking, just Tonto looking, and you see everything that needs to be said. Another that I love is when John Reed carries his barely alive brother and tries to help him. It's some great stuff. The cinematography is gorgeous. The establishing shots with the canyons just showed the grandness of the Western frontier. It really makes the movie feel cinematic in a great way. And as much as I hate how big the budget was, you do see that on camera. The props and the physical sets that were built look awesome. There are big areas that were physically built, as well as things that you might think were CGI, but aren't. Which, the CGI here is great and has held up pretty well over time. It's not distracting in this movie, which it should be, but it's not. Sound design is something I usually never talk about, but here the gun sound effects are incredible. I love how the music near the end too syncs up with a lot of the sound effects. Hans Zimmer did the music, and it's Hans Zimmer music. Fantastic as always. I also love the dry and the sweaty look that all the costumes and the characters had. This is something that is only seen in classic westerns or even in those pirate movies. Everybody here is dirty and sweaty and disgusting. Which the costumes are awesome in this. It got nominated for Best Hairstyle and Makeup as well as Visual Effects. And I think it deserved that costume nomination as well. I also like how the costume has meaning to it, like the sheriff star is his father's or the jacket was his brother's. It's a good way to have more of an emotional investment in him. But now let's talk about the story. And I think the story here is really good. It's not perfect as I've stated, but I like that the movie is from the perspective of Tonto. While I think that Tonto's storytelling scenes could be cut, I like that you don't know exactly what's true or what's false or was exaggerated. I like that in the beginning, Reed and Tonto, they have to be stuck together. The way that they meet, it isn't forced or feels weird. It's just an odd coincidence and later on they meet again. But I think what elevates the material here is the acting. Everyone here is just having a good time, from the villains to the protagonists. Depp here, he's doing a Jack Sparrow, but at the same time he's not. There's a lot more work with his eyes, and he has more grounded moments. I think Armie Hammer here does a good job as the main lead. He's a bit goofy at times, but he still conducts himself as an educated man. The story is mostly him just gaining confidence throughout, right up until the end when he is the full-blown Lone Ranger.
Hi-yo Silver! Away!
Listen, I know this movie isn't perfect, but it doesn't deserve to go down in history known just for how much money it lost. It's an entertaining movie. It sadly was just held back by that massive budget. Who knows, we may have gotten a few sequels by this point if it didn't bomb. And I think that saying goes for the other three movies we will be talking about soon. Battleship and John Carter. You know, there are very few movies that would fit my criteria as perfect. I think of movies like Jaws, Speed Racer, Tremors, and Lord of the Rings. They all fit that perfectly. With animation, though, you have just as many perfect movies, though. I always think about movies like The Iron Giant, Fantastic Mr. Fox, The Hobbit, and The Wind Rises. But when it comes to the animated sphere, I don't think any other movie has touched DreamWorks' How to Train Your Dragon. Now, How to Train Your Dragon, in my opinion, is DreamWorks' magnum opus, right after the Kung Fu Panda series. But with dragons, you have this incredible story that is told throughout the years of the main character, Hiccup. So in a sense, if you watched this when you were a kid, you basically grew up right alongside the character. It's weird to say this, but from the first movie when I was close to the same age as Hiccup to now, it's oddly surreal. With plans of the new live-action movie coming out next year, I wanted to revisit the series. So with that being said, let's cover every single movie along with the specials and the TV series. So let's get started with one of the greatest animated movies of all time. So, are we all in agreement that this movie is timeless? It's such a simple story that is well told, where our main character Hiccup is the chief's son, at a time where dragons and Vikings are bitter enemies. But, before we go into anything, I need to talk about the music. This is one of my favorite soundtracks, and it goes so deep that I can quote entire scenes by just the music alone. Okay, so I have the soundtrack up here for the one scene that I can quote. I don't know how to prove that I am not, like, cheating. Okay, I have a sock, which I will use as a blindfold. Alright, there's like a big wide shot. Okay there, bud. We're gonna take this nice and slow. And he like looks down. Position 3, no 4. And I think that the way this movie starts is great. The animation, the shadows, and the lighting in the beginning are fantastic, where the entire world is enveloped in darkness until all of a sudden there's these bright, shining blazes of fire with the dragons. The character introduction is quick and to the point as well. Characters and story here is at the front and center. You learn all about Hiccup, his likes, his dislikes, the way that he's treated on the island. Hiccup is a relatable protagonist as well, and it's done super fast. You learn that he's basically the outcast of the island. Even his own father doesn't like him that much.
Every time you step outside, disaster falls.
And I think that the heart of this movie is Hiccup's relationship with his father as well as Toothless. I like that it's a slow understanding of the dragons through him, where at first we learn that dragons are these ruthless creatures that will kill anything in sight, and as well as the Vikings. But we learn slowly that the Vikings know just as much about dragons as we, the audience, does. And I like that Hiccup here is a smart protagonist. He isn't a buff Viking, so he has to rely more on his inventions that he makes to be on the same level as them.
Okay, fine, but this will throw it for me.
And that all comes together when he invents the fake tail for Toothless, and slowly the two start to be in sync more with their flying sequences. These were so amazing to see in the theaters. This movie is almost 13 years old, and the colors and the shadows of when the romantic flight occurs still gives me chills, and the music as well. The editing of them are super exciting as well when he flies, especially with the end fight. The dragons are introduced very quickly too, and you understand what each one of them do. They're unique enough, but they're also not confusing.
Welcome to Dragon Training.
I also love these POV shots that happen every so often to really show the scale of the dragons as well. And the rules of the dragons are clearly set. Later on when Hiccup is training, Gobber teaches the kids how many shots the dragon has.
If you get blasted, you're dead.
How Vikings interact with the dragons.
Extremely dangerous, kill on sight.
How they feel about the dragons.
Go for the kill.
The dragon that Hiccup befriends, Toothless, is extremely likable right away. And how did they do this? Toothless is basically a cat, and this is to the benefit of the character. We're able to understand the rules of the dragon fast, as well as its cuteness. There's so many scenes in this movie and later on where Toothless is just straight up a cat, to even that thing that cats do when they bat you in the face. I've just got to say that this is just a perfect movie and a brilliant way to set up a world. Everything here is clearly established. So, with that being said, let's build up the world even more. Legend of the Bone Napper Dragon. This was like a bonus feature for the DVD release. I remember I got this like combo pack.
The Hammerhead Yak riding the Hammerhead Wheel. Deploy the yak.
The animation here, it's good. It's exactly like in the movie. You learn a lot about Gobber's backstory, and the humor is actually really funny.
Gobber, take off your pants.
Huh?
This is sort of like a pilot episode to the Dragon series later on. You see a lot of the dynamics that will become the sea in that series later on.
Oh, this tailbone is hurting my tailbone.
Overall, pretty good. The Book of Dragons. You're a new dragon trainer, and you're being taught about the book that Hiccup read in the first movie. It's okay. The animation is pretty cheap, and it reuses a lot of animation for the 3D elements. This is mostly those wanting to know how the franchise classifies the dragons. I would say that this is the only one that I would personally skip, or the one that I just view as not necessary to watch. The only thing that really adds to it is that you learn that Hiccup is slowly going to be adding to the book, like later on in the series. Gift of the Night Fury. This was basically like a Star Wars holiday special. It's the annual holiday celebrating dragons, but they're all of a sudden missing. You start to see that Hiccup and Toothless are starting to do tricks and get better as a rider. And in this, it's something that is very important actually. Hiccup creates a tail that can be used to fly alone, which will later get mentioned in the third movie.
You tried this once before. He didn't want it.
And there's actually some really great stuff here with Stoic.
I know what it's like to miss someone you love this time of year.
I think the thing that's kind of cool is just more the world building that you get to see. You get to see more of the traditions that Vikings use, along with more dragon information, sort of like how the eggs explode. The animation here, it's quite good, just like the Legend of the Bone Napper Dragon. It's a little downgraded, but it's still a good 15-minute special. Nothing harmful. Riders of Berk. This premiered on Cartoon Network, and I never actually got to see this or the Defenders of Berk on TV because I never had television growing up, so I'd always have to rent these from the library whenever they came out on the DVD. I love that it's still 3D animation. I can't stand it when a movie will come out and they'll do some sort of sequel series or prequel series and it will completely change the look of it. Sometimes it can be to its benefit, but other times it just feels more like a downgrade. And here, it's still 3D animation, and while it is a downgrade, it's not necessarily a massive one. It's still pretty good for a kids show. It's pretty incredible that most of the voice cast is here for the entirety of the Dragons television show run. A few voices are replaced, but most of the people did return. And I would say here the first season is pretty good. They address things like how not every Viking is willing to change with the rest of them, and that it's not a direct change right away where all things are great right away. The series addresses a slow change of how the dragons and the Vikings try to coincide with one another. In this season, there is a lot of conflicts and plot that evolve around people's lives changing now that the dragons are allies. There's always this lone Viking named Mildew who's trying to cause trouble. Later on, there's a main villain that's introduced, Alvin the Treacherous, which Mark Hamill voiced, and he does amazing.
Hiccup, hiccup, hiccup. Why do you have to make things so difficult?
But some of the episodes are more smaller, like how they're trying to find a place for Gobber now that Berk no longer has a need for dragon-killing weapons. How the farm animals of Berk get used to the dragons being around. Stoic the Vast getting his own dragon, Thornado. The dragons being sick and them trying to help him. Overall, this was a pretty good first season for a children's show. Defenders of Berk. This is season 2 of the Dragons series. Every single one has a different name. For instance, season 1 is called Riders of Berk. Season 2 is Defenders of Berk, and then the rest of the series is just called Race to the Edge. For Defenders of Berk, I think that this is pretty good. It's more so talking about the changes that a lot of the characters are going through now. For instance, Astrid and Hiccup's relationship are improving even more, as well as the writers in total. There's not a lot that I can complain about here. I mean, the animation is still the same. A lot of the villains are interesting. If you're wanting more of just Riders of Berk, here you go. Race to the Edge. Okay, so this is a prequel to How to Train Your Dragon 2. In the canon, it takes place after Defenders of Berk, but the way it was released was after How to Train Your Dragon 2. And it's pretty cool. When you watch How to Train Your Dragon 2, there's a lot of things that just kind of happen, and it makes sense that he would have a glider or, different sort of inventions. But if you want to see how he came about those inventions, this is the series, and it went on forever. From 2015 till 2018, this debuted on Netflix, and I remember every single time it would appear, I would always get excited. As I said, if you're wanting to see sort of how Hiccup comes into play with a lot of things that he has in the second movie, his sword and his glider, then this is the series. Same thing goes for a lot of the relationships like Astrid and Hiccup's. The other writers as well have their relationships in this series as well established well in advance. And overall, I would say that this is the best series. Granted, you do have to watch Riders of Berk and Defenders of Berk in order to understand some story ties, but this was always my favorite of the three. Dawn of the Dragon Racers. This was actually a sequel to Race to the Edge, but it's at the same time a prequel to How to Train Your Dragon 2. This was also sort of like The Legend of the Bone Napper, where you could get a combo pack or just have it as a bonus on the Blu-ray. This was basically the pilot episode of Race to the Edge. While it takes place after Race to the Edge, this was kind of the showcase for it. It's pretty good. It just kind of tells a story about how dragon races come about, how the face paint came about, and just the overall reaction to it on Berk and how it became sort of a tradition. It's not too bad. How to Train Your Dragon 2. I think that this is quite literally one of the greatest animated movies of all time. Its story, in my opinion, is leaps and bounds over the first movie, which is very rare with a sequel. Instead of telling the same story over again, they tell an entirely new chapter, and it's cool to see the creators age up the character. Hiccup is close to a man now, but he's in that weird stage where he has no idea of what to do with his life.
I'm still looking.
I think that the thing that I like the most about this movie is that it has real consequences of characters' actions. Stoic, one of the main characters, dies and never comes back after this. It's a harsh reality that this world offers that's not really present in a lot of children's movies.
No!
It forwards the characters too to push against the villain of the movie, as well as it helps Hiccup to take that final step into becoming the chief of Burke. Once again, characters and story are at their foremost here. I think that the animation here is some of the best that has ever been put to screen. The detail with the skin of the dragons and the fur of the capes is incredible. The colors as well, especially when they're in the dragon cave, are amazing. As I said, I like that everything here is still character and story driven, and things have changed, as do things with time. Hiccup has improved his glider, his leg now has a range of abilities, as well as his awesome sword. The story is more mature as well. While the first movie was more of a whimsical adventure film, this is more of the dark Empire Strikes Back movie. I think that the end of this too is uplifting and heavy hitting. The final battle is awesome because especially all of a sudden, to this Godzilla. When Hiccup becomes chief, I've always appreciated this shot, and I don't think a lot of people realize why. I don't know what it is, but you feel relieved that it's happening, but at the same time, you feel the weight of the responsibility he now faces.
The chief has come home!
Overall, one of the best showcases as to why animated movies are not something that can be overlooked. And I think that's the case with even the next movie. How to Train Your Dragon 3, or How to Train Your Dragon The Hidden World. Again, can I just say that the animation is absolutely incredible. Only 5 years went by from How to Train Your Dragon 2, and this just looks leaps and bounds better. The shadows and the colors, especially when they're in this forest, look amazing. Compare it to the first, and it's just so impressive to see how animation has come. The shots are a lot more complex as well. There's always something to look at, especially with Burke. And you know me, I love my one-shot takes, and there's a great one in the beginning of this. The story of this, in my opinion, is not as strong as the second movie, but I still love it just as much. Hiccup is basically a Pokemon catcher of this, and now his island is full of dragons. And when someone threatens their island, Grimoire the Grizzly. This guy is a dragon killer, not a catcher, and I like that because it's something completely new that Hiccup has never dealt with. Before in all the previous stories, whether it be with the second movie or with the little TV shows, everyone wanted to capture the dragons, not necessarily kill it. And it just so happens that this guy killed every Night Fury, and his voice acting is great.
Say, Chief Hiccup, or do I call you Hiccup? What do you prefer?
Speaking of the voice acting, did you know that nearly everyone has reprised their role throughout this entire series? I think that's something that's really amazing that not a lot commentate on. I mean, for one, TJ Miller did the voice of Tough Nut throughout the entire show line, but here he's replaced.
Cold feet. I've seen it before.
That's definitely not TJ Miller. But I like to kind of chalk it up to his voice changing. I don't know. I think that a lot here complain mostly about the mother character. She doesn't have a lot to do, but I like to point out that these stories constantly change. For instance, with the first movie, as I said, its main focus is on the relationship between Hiccup and his father and Toothless. The second movie was mostly about her. That was the story in How to Train Your Dragon 2. This is a completely new movie, so she's mostly in the background just giving advice, which I'm fine with. This movie is mostly about Toothless, believe it or not, and his relationship with the Light Fury. But also there's that good comparison between Astrid and Hiccup's relationship. I mean, the animation here is gorgeous. I mean, look at the lighting with the plasma bolt. Look at the hair. Look at the shadows. Look at the sunset. If it wasn't for the characters, a lot of these backgrounds would look so realistic. I mean, look at the sand. That looks real. Compare that with the first movie. This looks real. It looks like they literally drew in the dirt and just put it into the animated movie. A lot of the story here is for the fans. For instance, with the flashback, I see that he's got the toy that his mother gave him from the show. There's lots of shots that mirror from the first movie, like how the friendship of Hiccup and Toothless ended where it began. And I think that goes for the end prologue. This is one of the best endings to a movie, in my opinion. And I'm not afraid to admit, I got emotional when this happened. This wasn't necessarily me getting upset about the movie, but it was more so me saying goodbye to my childhood. It was oddly surreal. Something that had been there for me for the longest time was finally coming to a close. I don't really care what anyone says about The Hidden World. I think it's just as strong as a movie as the first two. How to Train Your Dragon Homecoming. This was a quick 22-minute short that takes place before the epilogue in the third movie, and it's pretty much okay. It's not necessarily at all. So, yeah, that's about it. So you can see that I've been here since the beginning, whether it be with the books or even the animated movies. So when I first heard of the live-action movie was in development, I think I was with everyone else, where I was raising my pitchfork and torch saying, this is not necessary, I'm not seeing this. But do a little research, and that's what I did. And now I'm pretty interested in it. First, look at who's making it. We're getting the original director and writer of the trilogy. Dean DeBlois is coming back to direct and write, and that surprised me, and it gives me a ton of hope. You have the composer, John Powell, is also coming back. So you have your main important people here. I think that the only worry is how well Dean will do directing live action compared to the animated world. The actors selected. I'm not very familiar with Hiccup, but I am with the actress for Astrid, and she's a really good one. I'm not too sure, but I think we'll have to wait until they're both in costume. And I think that goes for the world itself. How will it look? How will the dragons look in the live action? Are we talking about the stage show or more of a cartoony look? And I think this will make it or break it for people, especially me. How will the world look translated to live action? For me personally, I think that the stage show looked really impressive and all the dragons translated pretty well for a more realistic look. Maybe tweak Toothless a little, but do that, and I think it will be fine. I don't know, like I said, once we get our first look, that's what's gonna make it or break it for me.
Okay, it's go time. It's go time. And then the dive happens. Like the thing goes into the water. Come on, buddy. Come on, buddy.
I really need to get a life. Go-Go's Crazy Bones, a popular fad that was started in the 1990s that slowly transitioned into the early 2000s. These were collectible figurines that was basically the Marbles and Jacks 2.0. I mainly remember these being a popular fad in 4th grade for me. I mostly remember Series 1, mostly because that's when the reboot happened, because this was an early 90s toy that later got rebooted in the early 2000s. There was all sorts of different Go-Go's Crazy Bones. There was officially licensed ones like the ones with Marvel and Dragon Ball Z, to even just their weird quirky fads like Evolution. Now, what exactly is a Go-Go and what exactly is a Crazy Bone? I don't know. Oh. Do anyone actually remember these? As you can see, I still have my collection from grade school. I remember this guy very specifically because every single person had this at one point. I think everyone traded him for a little bit, but I wanted him so bad because, I was a big fan of Godzilla, and, there's kind of like a little Godzilla flair to him. Now, this guy, I remember everybody wanted. This was in a blind bag that I found, and I think I opened it at school, like I got it before the day, and I opened it on the playground, and everyone was like, whoa, you got a fire dude, and everyone wanted to trade me for him, but I never did. And this actually goes in tandem with the different color arrangements that everybody would get at times. So for instance, I have the exact same mold, but it's more so like a skull guy. And it just kind of goes to show like how weird these guys got at times. Like for instance, you would have, I don't even know mixed with a sumo wrestler, and then sometimes even like just a fish. Like there was just different animal types as well as humans. Now, one thing that I remember very clearly was they had different tin collectibles. Now, I have the limited gold edition as well as all the gold Go-Go's. Now, these guys were the Series 1, so they took different people from the first series, and all it was just a simple spray. But this was pretty cheap. I think it was like $10 if I had to remember correctly. Basically, you were paying $1 per Go-Go, but all it was just the first variants repainted. Nothing too special, but I thought that I would be the coolest cat in town when I would take these to school. I was wrong. I've seen close to 20 different movies in the movie theater this year. The most that I can say is that 4 of them have really met my expectations or have really been good. You have Spider-Verse, Super Mario Bros., Mission Impossible, as well as Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. A lot of the movies this year have had overblown budgets or have just been overhyped to death. I'm sorry, Transformers this year was not a good movie. But earlier this summer, along comes this little trailer for a movie directed by Gareth Edwards called The Creator. Now, I've actually been a massive fan of Gareth Edwards. I've been following his career for quite a while now, starting with the 2014 Godzilla film. Gareth Edwards also has directed my second favorite Star Wars film, Rogue One. I think that Gareth Edwards has a really good talent for shooting scope in his movies. That's very evident with the 2014 Godzilla film, how all of his shots are from a human perspective. But also you have Rogue One with like the giant X-Wings and Star Destroyers. He just knows how to shoot scope. So to actually see him do an original concept since his first movie is very surprising because he kind of stepped away from directing there for quite a while after Rogue One. And man, did he come out swinging. Go watch this movie. The Creator is my favorite movie of the year. It has topped Mission Impossible, Guardians of the Galaxy, Super Mario Bros., and Spider-Verse easily as my favorite thing that has been released so far this year. The Creator is a rare sci-fi movie in a long, long time that is not tied to almost anything. The Creator is rare in which a lot of its guns and weapons and cars and different designs doesn't feel like it's trying to pull from a separate franchise. Some of my favorite things about this movie are the designs. From everything from the guns, the computers, the cars, the ships, everything has its own uniqueness. And it feels like a mix of this 1950s aesthetic mixed in with nowadays technology. And that goes for the CGI. This movie, compared to a lot of different movies this year, was pretty small. $85 million is a lot of money, but compare this to like Indiana Jones or The Flash, which had like a $200 million budget and a $300 million budget, the CGI in this just blew both of those movies out of the water and did it with almost a fraction of their budget. It just goes to show that just because your movie's a big budgeted blockbuster doesn't mean it's going to be quality. I think that the shots in this movie are some of the most breathtaking shots that I've seen in a movie in quite a while, especially anytime there's this explosion that happens in the movie. Some of the best explosions I've seen in a long time in a movie. It just blew me away, literally. This is the first time in probably close to 5 years where I did not know where the story was going. In the first 20 minutes, you think you know where the story is going, but then it takes another twist, and then another twist, and then another. And by the end of it, I had no idea where this movie was going. It genuinely was surprising me the entire way through. The score for this movie was absolutely breathtaking. Like, I was wondering, okay, who did the score for this? And then all of a sudden, the name popped up in the credits. Hans Zimmer. Oh yeah, he did awesome on this movie. I really love the main story in this movie. That's where this shines the most. You can have amazing CGI, but if your story is not that great, your movie's not going to be that great. And I don't want to give away any spoilers for this. Like I said, go watch this yourself. But the storyline, in my opinion, is one of the strongest that has been in science fiction in quite a long time. I feel like science fiction has lost its identity along the years as J.J. Abrams came in with his 2008 Star Trek movie, and then he middled it all with The Force Awakens. Science fiction now just doesn't feel as interesting as it used to be, like for instance with the original Star Trek or Star Trek The Next Generation. With this world, this was the first time where I wanted to see more of it. The world building in this is incredible. Every 5 seconds, you're getting some new bits of information or something cool that they're showing you, like that the robots do or that the world offers for you. That's the first time I've wanted to see more of a world in quite a long time. I think that the directing of this movie was flawless. Everything from the acting, the editing, the music was just on point for me. Like, I took 2 friends and my younger brother to this movie, and by the end credits, we were just in shock, like, wow, what did we just watch? And then one of my buddies actually leaned over to me and is like, Zeth, that's the best movie of the year. I couldn't be in more of agreement. All 4 of us were in shock. We just loved this movie. Please go see this and support it. There won't be another movie that can top this, in my opinion. And I feel this is going to be like a real Steel or even a Pacific Rim situation where maybe it doesn't do that great in theaters, and then people discover it, and they're like, whoa, why didn't I see this in theater? This is going to have that same potential, I feel. As I've stated, I don't think another movie this year will top this for me. Maybe.
And also, there's an actor from Diary of a Wimpy Kid who I grew up watching.
Roderick Rules. Man.
Yes, Roger Rules.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
where I was
absolutely.
like, oh my god, that's Roderick.
Yeah.
When it comes to movies that are covered here, they usually have a close connection to my early childhood. Some of the videos that I've covered, like Voltron or How to Train Your Dragon, are ones that I saw in an early age and have stuck with me over time. But while everyone had different tastes growing up, I think everyone saw the Diary of a Wimpy Kid movies. I stopped collecting these books around the 9th book, The Long Haul. Growing up, I was a small, scrawny kid in elementary school, so Greg, he was a pretty relatable protagonist. But when it comes to the books compared to the movies, I consider the movies to be way better in every way. As I got older and grew as a person, Greg never did. And that's fine because it's a book series, but he just became insufferable to me. In the movies, though, Greg throughout grows, and each one is about him fixing or growing in a relationship, whether it's his best friend Rowley, his brother, Holly Hills, or even his dad. So let's take a look at one of my personal favorite trilogies. So for starters, there's not a whole lot of information when it comes to the production of these movies on the internet. The best is that Jeff Kinney had a small blog about the events as well as a handful of interviews when the movies were being released. If you're looking for more of an in-depth look at the making of the film and the casting, you have to read. That's right, it's a bit weird, but most of the information pertaining to the production is in the Wimpy Kid movie diary, released just a few days after the movie. This was so cool to get as a kid, because this actually made me start to get interested in the behind the scenes of movies. It basically tells the story about how Jeff Kinney came up with and wrote the first book all the way to the wrap up of the movie. Practically everything is covered here, from the extras, the props, differences from the books, stunt doubles, hairstyling, editing, casting, and the writing. It's a really interesting read and actually comes from the perspective of Jeff Kinney. It got updates along the way with every movie that came out as well, so my volume just goes over the first one while there's others that go over all 3. Definitely check it out if you get the chance. So I want to put you in the seat of where movies were in 2010 when Diary of a Wimpy Kid was released. You had massive tentpole movies throughout that year. Alice in Wonderland, Toy Story 3, Iron Man 2, How to Train Your Dragon, and The A-Team. But Diary of a Wimpy Kid still made a killing, grossing $75.7 million on just a budget of $15 million. For myself, I thought that the movie was great as a kid, but as time has gone on, this movie is almost unbearable at times for me. I much prefer Roderick Rules and Dog Days over this. That's not to say that this movie is bad, it's not for a kid's film. It looks nice, the movie was shot on actual film, the music is iconic, but when it comes to the characters and story here, that's what really holds it back from me. It does serve a purpose though, because we don't actually follow a hero, we mostly follow what is the villain of the story. Greg in the first movie is not a likable protagonist in my opinion. Rather, he grows into one in the second and the third movie. But here,
Hey! It's mine, fella.
Greg is just a terrible person. But the weird thing about that is you still oddly root for him because he's the underdog of the story. You want to see Greg pull through and make it out of the hole that he's dug. But at the same time, I still hate Greg and see how bad of a friend he is. But it's justified, however, the way it's presented. I think that while the other movies have better cohesive stories, this one in comparison is like a slice of life anime. You consistently see how terrible of a friend Greg is every day, from the name calling, the putting down, not being sorry about the arm, and finally it's the safety patrol fiasco. I like that it's a slow build up to Rowley and Greg's friendship crumbling. If Greg was a perfect friend right from the beginning and he made one mistake and that's what caused Rowley to walk away, it wouldn't feel believable. So yes, while Greg here is a terrible protagonist, it serves a purpose. You want to see him overcome his selfishness, and instead of treating Rowley like a sidekick, treating him as an equal. I think, though, all the credit should go to Zachary Gordon. He just oozes charisma and plays Greg perfectly, in my opinion. No one will be able to do as good of a job of him in this role. It's like trying to recast Spock, which they've done twice now. You will always think of Greg when you see a picture of Zachary Gordon, and the opposite. But what about the others in the cast? Well, for starters, playing opposite of Zach is Robert Caprone. And Robert plays Rowley perfectly from what the books describe him as. Someone that's sensitive and who's happy being himself regardless about what others think. Robert is able to pull this off so well. So when we see Greg consistently put Rowley down or get him into a mess, you feel for Rowley. The acting here is done very well. When I was younger, I didn't think, oh, that's not Rowley or that's not Greg. No, these are perfect casting, and that goes for even more. Rachel Harris plays Greg's mom, and she has some wonderful scenes where she tries to counsel Greg. Greg never takes the advice, so you just want to choke the kid. But over the 3 movies, you see how Greg more so goes to his mother for advice rather than his father until the 3rd movie. Now, the father is played by none other than Steve Zahn.
The Zahn!
Now, Steve doesn't really get a ton of work to do here until more so the 2nd and especially the 3rd movie. But his casting was vital. So while here he's a bit of an afterthought, as I stated, each movie works on a relationship of Greg's here. In the 1st movie, it's about his friend Rowley. The 2nd movie is about his brother, and finally his dad. Which, oh, I didn't forget. Devin Bostic is 100% Roderick. No one can replace this man as Roderick.
Let's go, baby hippo!
Roderick is as much Devin Bostic as Devin Bostic is Roderick. He is the only reason this movie is funny to me. All of his scenes are comedy gold.
Down the winding yellow road, does she...
And in the next movie, he gets to shine even more. So yeah, for a 1st movie, it's not bad. It was a very faithful adaptation that satisfied me as an avid fan of the books. But like I said, I just don't like Greg here at all until the end. As I said, it serves a purpose for believability, but he's just rotten to the core throughout the runtime. As I stated, Greg changes, and those changes do carry over to the next film, though. Okay, let me get something straight. This is the best movie in the series. Everything here is improved for the better. Everything you may have hated about the 1st movie is cut out here, and everything that you liked is made more prominent. Liked all the scenes with Roderick? He's practically the main character here. Didn't like how Greg treated Rowley? He's a better friend now and less of a narcissist. Didn't think the Zahn had enough to do? He has better and more memorable lines here.
You picked the housekeeper over the supermodel?
I think that the writing and the directing of this movie is really good and focused. All the little pieces that it sets up all come back and form a complete puzzle by the end. David Bowers directed this in Dog Days compared to the last film, and he's actually had a pretty good hand in directing and working on kids' movies. He directed Flushed Away as well as the underrated and forgotten Astro Boy. Everything, though, here, as I said, is leaps and bounds better than the 1st movie. Its heart and humor especially. The heart of the movie focuses on the relationship between Roderick and Greg and their brotherly dynamic. The movie starts off where they're forced to spend more time together, not really wanting to. Slowly, though, they both see how they can rely on one another. A brother isn't just someone you have to be around constantly. They can be a friend and a person that you can depend on. I like also that when the relationship crumbles halfway through, it's not due to the pictures themselves, but how Roderick feels wronged that Greg told their mother.
You're my brother. She'll never be my friend.
Roderick's trust in Greg falls apart until Greg gains it back with Roderick's respect as well. That's why this movie is loved so much. The relationship between Roderick and Greg is something that everyone can relate to with their own family. With that being said, the movie is pretty funny.
If there was a lock, I would use it. In fact, maybe you should put one on. You know, why write a new one when there's a perfectly good paper already written by your brother?
Okay now, Devin, in this shot, just eat the chicken wing non-stop. Wait, why does he have to? In the script, it's just normal banter. It's what the entire story hinges on. Can you not see that? And what's that? Relatability.
Isn't that cheating?
Also, one of my favorite jokes is when the dad discovers the pictures.
Roderick, can you explain what you're doing in this photo? That's not me. That's not you? Nope.
There's something that is changed from the books for the better here, though, in my opinion. For instance, Holly Hills. I think that she was maybe in like one book, and once Greg was called Fragley on accident, he lost feelings instantly. But here, it's a small budding romance that's worked and dragged over to the next film. It's nothing amazing, but she's not some throwaway character that pops in for a couple scenes. The movie is the best in the series, no doubt about that. I just like how well the story was laid out, and the writing, and the humor, the characters, the directing. But while the next movie isn't as good in my opinion, I do like the main story just as much. Alright, so Dog Days has a worse and better story than Roderick Rules. Let me explain. Greg in the first movie, one of the lessons that he had to learn was lying. Same goes for even in the sequel. But here, Greg is kind of like he is in the first movie. While he's friends with his brother due to the second movie and his relationship with Rowley is fine, this story tells about the relationship between Greg and his father. But my only issue with this is that most of the movie hinges on a storyline that Greg is lying about working a job at the country club. I do, however, like everything after Frank discovers the truth. I think once this storyline is dropped, there is some of the best writing for a father-son dynamic, just like with the brother dynamic in the last movie. I like how at one point Riley gets told by his parents that they're disappointed in him, and Greg doesn't quite understand why Riley's upset about it.
Why are you upset? They didn't even yell at us.
Getting yelled at by your parents was something that you could easily blow off the next day, or be forgotten even in an hour. But once Frank tells that he's disappointed in Greg, that's when he finally understands it.
Aren't you mad?
No. I'm just disappointed.
Having someone tell you that they're disappointed in you is hard to put into words. It's more subtle and quiet. It's telling Greg that his dad, someone who thought could trust him, no longer can. Once this scene plays out, Frank and Greg don't talk to one another for a good part of the movie. Only the bare necessities. They're forced to sit next to one another and sleep together and stay together. It's awkward, but it's also heartbreaking. I like, though, that Greg does learn his lesson and speaks up, and he admits his faults when he needs to.
I did it.
And in turn, his dad defends him for it.
Shut up, Stan! Just shut up!
I think that the main lesson of all three movies is displayed here in this monologue that is spoken by Steve Zahn.
You know what my grandpa always used to say? A man who never made a mistake never made anything. The trick is to be responsible and to learn from your mistakes. And you can do that. You're a really great kid, Greg. And I'm not just saying that because we're a lot alike.
Dog Days is not better than Roderick Rules in my opinion, but it's so close. If it wasn't for that beginning how Greg was basically set back to zero, I would love this movie more than Roderick Rules. As for the humor of this film, It does have its laughs though, where I burst out laughing every time I pop this on.
Why are you hugging me when Mom isn't around to see it? Get off me!
Of course, every single one of them have Roderick in them. So near the end of the movie, Roderick's band gets a gig for Heather's Sweet 16. And when that happens, one of the greatest scenes in cinematic history occurs.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
What's your favorite song?
Oh, wow.
The Diary of a Wimpy Kid movies are all pretty good kids movies. They feel like they're being written by adults who understand what makes kids tick. What a real relationship between siblings is like, or a father and a son, or even two best friends. These are not my favorite movies of all time, far from it. But I don't think a lot of people understand the point of all three movies. They tell the story of someone who starts off as a terrible person who slowly improves as a human being. I honestly wish they were able to make more of these though. I think they would have had to shoot Roderick Rules and Dog Days back to back, while then shooting the next back to back. Kids grow up, and that was very evident in Dog Days. These movies are not perfect, but they did give us Roderick.
Seriously, why is he eating a chicken wing?
Remakes. When it comes to a lot of remakes with movies or songs or even video games, usually they are soulless cash grabs. The company is ready for your money only to hit you with the reality. Remakes can be some of the worst pieces of media we can consume. And when one is announced, it's like the company is saying, "Don't worry, we have no ideas." I think everyone has been burned by a remake at one time. A property you love, cherish, and desire to have more of is turned into a soulless and empty version of what it once was. It gives you an angry and an empty feeling at the end of it. I love it, however, when the filmmaker or the designer cherishes the world, the characters, the story as much as you do. Sometimes a remake can be a better version of that movie or video game. Take, for example, Little Shop of Horrors. Little Shop of Horrors isn't necessarily a remake of the 1960s version, but you mention Little Shop of Horrors to anyone, most likely they're going to think of the one that you're referring to as the Frank Oz one. When a remake is great, everyone benefits. Take the new One Piece. Old fans aren't insulted, the original anime now has more people watching it than ever, Netflix gets money, and a series can actually get a season 2 for once. But alas, sometimes we have a remake that can fly under the radar. Sometimes that's due to the nicheness of the property, or just bad marketing. And there's one reimagining that no one, and I mean no one, talks about, and that is 2009's Astro Boy. Astro Boy is just one of those movies that no one, and I mean no one, talks about this. It's another one of those rare Japanese-American remakes that is just really, really good and pays close attention to the source material and improves it in some ways, in my opinion. If you don't know, Astro Boy, it was originally a manga from the 1950s, and it has been brought to life through tons of different anime iterations throughout the decades. Astro Boy is probably one of the most recognizable anime faces of all time. Even if you have never watched or read it, you probably know those two spiky hair points. For myself, my first introduction was through the 2009 movie, and then I began to read the manga after this and watch the different iterations. For me, I don't even remember the movie coming out, just that my dad took me after school to it one day. As a kid, I thought that this movie was pretty awesome. It had a lot of stuff that I really liked, especially coming off of Iron Man from the previous year. It was like a kid version of that movie. Astro Boy is just another one of those box office bombs that nobody talks about, lost and forgotten to the span of time. It had a $65 million budget, and it only brought back $45 million. As a result, it shut down its studio and was forgotten about quickly. So with that being said, I just wanted to take a minute to talk about what I personally liked about it and its flaws. For starters, it's a CGI cartoon. Now, usually when companies try to remake a Japanese anime, they always go for the live action approach, which has worked. Speed Racer, One Piece, and Alita Battle Angel, but usually live-action anime adaptations are very, very bad. So to see this just be a CGI animated film is a big welcome, and that goes for the character designs. Astro Boy did take a lot of the designs and change some things for an American audience, but the changes aren't very drastic. The only issue that I see is that the animation is a bit all over the place. Sometimes it can be beautiful and have some amazing art, but other times it can look dull and boring. But luckily, when the animation isn't the best at times, the voice actors are carrying this movie when they can. Freddie Highmore, Nicolas Cage, and Samuel Jackson are just some of the cast here. In my opinion, everyone here does a pretty decent job. And one of the most surprising standout performances is that of Nicolas Cage. I think that Nicolas Cage has an underrated talent for voice acting, and he could be used even more.
Here, right here. All your needs will be met.
I'm hungry!
In a minute!
But even if you have a lot of great voice acting talent, that's all worthless if the story is trash. And here, it's a bit mixed for me. I do enjoy the movie, but I think that for the most interesting stuff in the story, it's placed at the beginning and then once the final battle starts. There's a bit of a light side and dark side push and pull here. Dr. Elephant discovers that there's a star fragment and creates a powerful source of energy from it called the blue core, but there's also a bad energy called the red core that stems from it. They plan to use it on one of the new robots, the Peacekeeper, but plans go south once Toby is killed. And I think that this is all done super well here. The distress and the sadness that his father Tedma faces from the loss is handled so well. In the original manga, Tedma sells Astro off to Hamig after he cannot fulfill the role of his original son. You never felt that loss in the original manga, but here in the movie, it's more subtle. Every time Tedma looks at his replacement, it just reminds him that his actual son is gone and never coming back. It's told the same as the manga technically, but it's very different in tone.
He was meant to replace Toby. But every time I look at him, it just reminds me that Toby is gone. And he's never coming back.
I also love the part when Astro is starting to discover his powers, and the score is just amazing. Once Tedma sends Astro off, it goes into a standard typical kids movie. Nothing harmful here, but pretty forgetful. All of what I personally enjoy in the middle of the story are basically all of the Easter eggs, like how the creator of Astro Boy, Tezuka, is seen multiple times throughout the film, or how Astro is in his black and green shorts as well as his red boots. I like that they were able to utilize almost all of Astro's powers throughout the film, from the little things to the more ridiculous.
I got machine guns in my butt.
If I had to pick out what my favorite thing though, it is the music though. It's just sublime in the entire movie. Astro Boy is one of those remakes that I feel has been forgotten about as time has gone on. While I don't think it's one of the best movies ever made, I think that it should be remembered for how well it remade Astro Boy without it trampling on the original manga or anime. Anime adaptations can be accomplished when you faithfully follow the source material. Astro Boy should not be forgotten, and it should be added to the list of successes like Speed Racer or One Piece.
So now that I've discussed how remaking something can be great and awesome, I think it's time to start remaking myself a little bit. Hey y'all, Scott here. Rebranding, am I right?
Go out and see it. Just go. That's where the review can basically end. Godzilla Minus One is the newest Japanese Godzilla movie from Toho. This is a momentous occasion for Godzilla fans. You know, it's the first one to be released in American theaters since Shin Godzilla. You know, we've had the Netflix releases like the anime show as well as the anime movies, as well as the MonsterVerse, but this is really a special occasion. You know, Shin Godzilla came out 10 years ago, so it's the first time in a long time that a Japanese Godzilla movie has been in theaters, and wow. Wow is all I can say. Go out and see this now. It's worth every dime. And actually, this is the first time that I recommend go and see it on the biggest screen that you can, like the IMAX. I saw this movie twice already, and first it was the IMAX on a special screening on Wednesday for fans, and then I saw it yesterday on Saturday. It was still incredible no matter what, but definitely go see it on the biggest screen that you can and with the best audio that you can. The moments when Godzilla is roaring, you really feel it in your chest, or for instance, when the original Godzilla theme is coming back in and it's, you know, this amazing reorchestrated music. This was probably my favorite movie of the year. It topped everything for this year. It's so impressive how Japan can come out and make something that's $15 million with the budget that this has, and it's so much better than what something like The Flash or Indiana Jones that had like $200 or $300 million budgets, and it just looked 100 times better than anything that has been released in the last 5 years. As a Godzilla fan, this is originally, when I was coming out of the theater, I was like, that was good, but I don't want to say it's one of the best Godzilla movies or my personal favorite because, I really love a lot of the classic ones like Godzilla vs. Biollante from the Heisei era, or Ebirah Horror of the Deep, or Son of Godzilla, or even Final Wars, for example, I have a lot of nostalgia for. But, having seen it twice now, I've just got to say that this is probably one of the most well-made Godzilla films. It has some of the best moments that have Godzilla in it, and its human story is one of the best told in Godzilla. It's very emotional. The acting is a 10 out of 10. There's no goofy one-liners that you can kind of giggle at.
Take that, you dinosaur!
I've got to say the characters in this movie are some of my favorite that has been in a Godzilla film. Everyone from the scientist to the kid, the boat captain, and the main character himself. Just easily some of the most emotional moments in a Godzilla film, and probably the most tense I felt in a Godzilla movie. When it comes to the boat scene, when you first see Godzilla fully in his form after the bombing, you have the moment when it's like Jaws almost, and the build up to it when all the scientists and the people on the boat, they're like, oh, what are we doing out here? What are we doing out here? And the one scientist is like, oh, we're bait, basically. And the other guys are like, we can take it on. And it's kind of like building, the tension is building. And then that one part when Godzilla comes out of the water and chomps on this boat, and then it turns back to the people and they're like, let's get going. It's easily some of the best human moments in Godzilla. And when it comes to that, it's a pretty rare occasion that the human characters really shine in a Godzilla film, at least recently. I know a lot of the Heisei movies and the Showa movies, as well as even the Millennium era, have a lot of great human stories. Not every single one of them is a hit, but definitely recently with Godzilla, the movies have not been rewatchable as much as the original movies because, the human characters have not been written very well. You have something like Shin Godzilla come out, and it was okay, but a lot of the human moments in that movie, you were just waiting for the Godzilla parts to appear. It was kind of boring. I mean, it was still good the first time around, but not something that you would want to rewatch over and over and over again, like this, for example. The MonsterVerse, I've been very disappointed with its human stories. I haven't watched Legacy of Monsters, the TV series, yet, but it's definitely been pretty miss on the MonsterVerse's end, as in terms of a compelling human story. I think the best one was the 2014 Godzilla film, but it wasn't really that rewatchable, and the Godzilla moments were pretty sparse. So watching that a second or a third time is a bit boring, to be honest. This is the opposite effect of that. Its main story evolves around Godzilla. There's little moments that are, not really tied to Godzilla, but almost the entire storyline hinges on Godzilla as a main character almost. And all I've got to say is that you really should go out and watch this movie. It's easily the best movie of the year. The music especially was just a treat to hear the original Showa themes in that theater reorchestrated, with the big booming drums, and the orchestra was just amazing. Seriously, the soundtrack in this, when the main Godzilla theme was happening, and there's this part at the end when the boats are all gathering together and the captain, is trying to shout this order, and all of a sudden, the drums are going, they're slowing down, the dun, 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 and then all of a sudden it comes back together in this momentous, really fast-paced version of the Godzilla theme. No matter how many times I could see this movie, just the dumbest smile on my face would appear. Seriously, I love this movie. I can't stop praising it. I love that so many people are praising this movie and that it's getting good reviews and it's doing very well for an American box office. Almost everybody is saying that this is a perfect Godzilla film, and I really can't say there's a whole lot of bad in this Godzilla film. A lot of people say, there's like bits and moments that the CGI doesn't look that great. I really didn't see any that I could complain about, but just in total, go watch this movie. I'm so happy that a Godzilla film, especially a Japanese one, is getting so much mainline attention and that it's getting positive reviews from both the critics and the fan side. This isn't something that's splitting up the audience or the critics side. Everybody is unanimous in this movie being absolutely amazing, and it's such a special treat to see that. But anyways, yeah, just, my quick thoughts on the movie.
This year was weird. It quite possibly was one of the greatest years for video games. But when it comes to movies, looking back on a list of this year, I completely forgot that Dial of Destiny was released. D&D was a movie that came out. I completely forgot that the Marvels was even a thing. This year truly was the year for video games, though. When it came to even video game adaptations, most of them were actually pretty good. There were a ton of cool theatrical experiences when it came to the limited theater releases as well this year. When I was on vacation earlier, I got to see Pathan, and that was pretty fun. The Sound of Freedom being an absolute heart-wrenching movie. Suzume and the Boy and the Heron were disappointments for me story-wise, but had some of the most gorgeous animation put to film. And most recently, Godzilla Minus One was one of the best movies of the year. When it came to video games though, Nintendo was holding the line with some of the best announcements and releases this year. I am still shocked about that Thousand Year Door remake. I recently got a PS5, so finally there's a handful of titles that I haven't played through yet or experienced. Tears of the Kingdom and Mario Wonder won't be on this list because I haven't fully beat them, but they're both wonderful experiences that have pushed both of their genres forward in new and exciting ways. Now, just because something isn't on this list doesn't mean I didn't enjoy it. I give extra points to things released this year, and I make the rule where I have to fully beat it or watch it. The Finals is a game I never imagined actually coming to form. A game where every single building is destructible. This is just chaos. Okay, so not the greatest movie of the year, but I had a lot of fun watching this with my group of friends and then eating Chinese food after. The first half of the movie is actually pretty great, with some really good edge of your seat tension. I think it suffers in the second half, but for a video game movie that was in the making for almost a decade, this could have been so much worse. So I think this will be controversial. Across the Spider-Verse forwards animation in some of the most spectacular ways ever seen or brought to film before. Its stories and characters are brilliant, making you care about every aspect of their lives. The soundtrack is awesome. There's a great emotional core to everything. And of course, Spider-Man 2099. I think the only thing I can complain about really is that the beginning is a little slow, but that's all that I can really say. The ending is really good with how many spider people show up and villains. Sony, take your time with the third movie. If it's on the same level as this but better, I can wait another 5 years. Hi-Fi Rush is a game that was announced and dropped the next day, and wow. If you love music, this is the game for you in every aspect. This makes walking fun. The story, while it's okay in my opinion, the gameplay is where this shines, and its soundtrack just makes the entire world this living and breathing jukebox. It's not a AAA video game, but to have this much love and polish and effort come out of something like a little title that they just dumped, other companies need to take notice of this. This year really proved that Marvel needs to get their butt into gear starting next year. The superhero genre isn't necessarily dead, we're just tired of bad scripts and poor characters, which is something that Marvel has been doing for the last few years now. I haven't even had the heart to watch Ant-Man yet, or the Marvels, or practically anything Marvel related this year. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 turned that around completely though. A funny and full of heart movie with great characters. It finishes character arcs started all the way back in the first Guardians movie and with one of the best voice performances done. It has a good, hateable villain for once. I love that nobody died because that would be actually pretty stupid in a movie filled with so much of it already. This has some of the best musical choices by James Gunn and probably one of the top 3 best fights in MCU history. Everyone's so scared of the way that he'll handle DC, and I think he's gonna do great things. I cannot wait for Superman's legacy. Bowser's Fury is one of the best 3D Mario games, but it's only about 5 hours long. I love this, and I hope that this is kind of what the future of Mario gives us, because for some extra add-on to an already great game, This is fantastic. Everything was meticulously placed and makes you want to explore every inch of the map, all guided by that sweet, sweet swing music. Everyone is a cat here. You can have Godzilla-sized battles with Bowser. Bowser's Fury is something that could have been a throwaway mode, but it was turned into an unforgettable Mario experience that will have something people can look back on saying it's a classic. So last year, The Long Dark was one of my favorite things I played through. So this year, I decided to give more survival games a chance. The Wild 8, it's basically just The Long Dark with a top-down perspective. Perfect. The Creator is a movie that comes only once in a while, it seems like. Excellent character arcs with an engaging story with some very impressively done visuals for a measling budget. As someone who has loved classic sci-fi shows, and to see it slowly go down the toilet, this was just a huge breath of fresh air. The music by Hans Zimmer is amazing, the performances are emotional and they have meaning. I don't necessarily need a sequel to this, leave this alone, Disney. Gareth Edwards has such a unique style to his filmmaking, and I wholeheartedly welcome the next original idea from his mind. So, Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1 is one of the greatest action movies to come out since RRR. I loved every single second of this movie. Tom Cruise, despite being 61, is still kicking butt and doing some of the most insane stunts ever put to film. I love that this was split into 2 parts because we can get a longer and stretched story that's not rushed. If the next movie is Ethan Hunt's last adventure, so be it. This franchise has been running for nearly 3 decades and has one of the most consistent hit after hit after hit. Dead Reckoning also is just great, and it has such an exciting ending and car chase sequence that just doesn't stop or let you go. Alright, so I know this movie isn't for everyone. I love the original 1993 film and have been dying to see a good video game adaptation done right. This year had a ton of great ones, but by far my favorite was the Mario movie. I saw this 5 times in the theater, and I loved it more and more and more. Of course, it doesn't have some of the best pacing or character arcs, but the rewatchability of the movie is something that I never expected. Not my favorite movie, but I could turn this on any day of the week and have a blast. I want to say that the music is my favorite aspect of the movie. To hear some of my favorite Mario tracks blasting loud and hard in the theater was wonderful, and I cannot wait to see where a sequel takes us, or even that new Zelda movie. Out of nowhere, this game appears and becomes one of the funniest,
There's a V8 engine in here?
Scariest. Okay, it's just a small little bug. That's not a small bug! And best video games I have played in a while.
Oh, just run, Chris.
Can't jump on the railing.
Why is it always me? Why? How is it always me?
I cannot tell you how much I have laughed at my friends and myself for our stupidity.
I might die with the landmine right here.
Landmine! Yeah, I can go down and get this spider. You!
Somebody died. I told you. I told you there was a landmine. What is 25? Oh my goodness!
The game, depending on who you play it with, can be hard. Jason's just taking off.
No! Jason, why?
I know for my little group, we haven't even gotten to the last couple moons because of how much we keep dying and not meeting the quota.
So I'm gonna smack it, and then I will chase them this way, and then you grab it, okay?
Alright, you ready, Damien? Be ready to leave. Alright, I'm ready. Okay, you get him.
Okay. Lethal Company is something that I can see sticking around for the next few years, and I cannot wait to see what's added next.
Oh. Nice.
When it comes to adaptations, it can be very, very hard to nail down a proper one, but it can be done. One Piece is the best television show of the year. Give us season 2 on the double, because if they keep it up with the amount of respect for the source material, they can have a show that can be 8 to 9 seasons long. I love that they kept everything goofy while having some stuff play out a little more seriously this time. The cast here is immaculate. Everyone here is their character, and Luffy especially, he was probably the hardest to nail down, and they did it. I can't believe they did it. The show would have fallen apart if it wasn't for him casted properly. Zoro is excellent and exudes the cool and dumb attitude that he always has, and they used the 3 swords. Sanji, he's just Sanji, just a little more toned down this time, which I'm fine with. The music especially is something to be proud of, because they don't use the main theme until the perfect time. One Piece is something that every upcoming adaptation has to look at. They don't have to be this hyper over-the-top like Speed Racer, but it shows when you have respect for the source material and apply it to the script and to everything else, you're guaranteed a surefire hit. Easily, the best thing that has been released this year is Godzilla Minus One. Everything about this movie is a 10 out of 10. Godzilla for me is my favorite franchise of all time. It overtakes everything for me. Coming from the standpoint of growing up watching Godzilla constantly and being in that weird limbo after Final Wars, this was the Godzilla movie that I have been waiting for since Final Wars. Everything that has been released since Godzilla 2014 has been missing key elements that I'm always walking away from, enjoying for the most part, but they've been missing that mark. Shin Godzilla got close, but looking back, it was a bit disappointing, to be honest. Godzilla Minus One not only has some of the best monster action in the franchise's 70-year history, but has one of the most compelling, tragic, relatable, and interesting human stories told. As a Godzilla fan, I cannot tell you how satisfying and cool it was to walk into an IMAX theater packed to the brim with fellow fans of all ages decked out with their Godzilla shirts. That has never happened for me, even with the MonsterVerse movies or Shin Godzilla. To see also the reception from just the average Joe is astounding. This is a Japanese Godzilla movie that was not advertised, where you had to go and read subtitles in a theater, and people were raving about this with box office records being smashed left and right. For me, Godzilla Minus One will probably eventually end up in my top 5 favorite Godzilla movies. For 2 hours, my butt was glued to the seat, and no one would have removed me from it. The whole time, I was just smiling ear to ear like a little kid. And when that wonderful Godzilla music came in, I was practically hyperventilating. Godzilla Minus One will go down in history as showing everyone as to how to properly budget a movie with amazing looking effects. I cannot stress how important and impressive this is. Godzilla Minus One is something I'll probably come back to over and over and over again as time goes on, and I cannot wait to see what Toho cooks up next.
When it came to 2023 with a lot of movies, I feel like we've gotten so many forgettable movies. There are so many movies that I was thinking back on when I was choosing my favorite things that came out in 2023, and I just couldn't remember a lot of what came out, especially closer to the beginning of the year. Not a lot went down as highly memorable. And sadly, I think that this applies the most to Wonka. Wonka serves as a prequel to the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory movie with Gene Wilder, and that movie, in my opinion, is one of my favorite. I absolutely adore that original movie, and I remember when we had it on VHS tape, that's something I'd constantly be rewinding over and over and over again, especially the music and the songs. It's a classic for a reason. Wonka, I just don't see it becoming a classic, and everyone that's saying it's fantastic, I'm just not on the same page about. I think for starters, Timothée Chalamet, while not the best choice of Willy Wonka, definitely not my first pick. The main reason he was picked was because he's popular right now with Dune Part 2 coming out and with Dune and everything that had to do with that. That's the only reason he was picked, really. There's no other reason that I saw in this movie where
I'm thinking, oh yeah, he's the perfect young Willy Wonka. It's like, no. I think that there's some moments when he's singing that are really good, but you can definitely tell there's an auto-tune on that. But that's not to say that the music was bad. I think that most of the music was actually quite enjoyable. I think that where this movie goes wrong is in the way Willy Wonka is portrayed as well as its main story. This is meant to be a prequel to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, yet it doesn't act like it. Gene Wilder played that part like an absolute lunatic, where you never really were expecting where it would go next with his character. And with the Timothée Chalamet character, it's quite the opposite of that. It's exactly what you expect. It's the very nice, big-eyed, this kid's gonna come into the town and prove everyone wrong, or he's gonna set people's worlds on fire. It's very, very step-by-step, done a billion times what you would expect before. I think the biggest thing about this that really hinders this movie is that it's a prequel, to be honest. Everything, you're waiting to see the Chocolate Factory, you're waiting to see where he gets the idea from the golden ticket. Like I said, I'm glad they didn't explain everything about this, but those are the kind of things that you're expecting in a prequel, I guess. I don't know. Like I said, most of this movie was pretty forgetful if I had to be very critical. Did I enjoy myself? Yeah, sure. I went with a group of friends, we all had fun, but if I'm being honest, it was just a very forgettable experience. That being said, though, there's a couple things I want to comment on that I really, really found amazing in this movie. For one, the CGI is a bit all over the place. There's some pretty horrendous CGI in this, especially with Hugh Grant's Oompa Loompa. That just is nightmare fuel. But there's this part in the movie that really impressed me, and it was when he has to milk a giraffe. The CGI on this giraffe was flawless. I can't believe that wasn't an actual like animatronic for some of the close-ups, or for some of the faraway takes, like they used like a cardboard cutout or something like that. It looked so incredibly real, like Lion King like quality. It was amazing. So great job on doing a CGI giraffe, I guess. It was just amazing. Another thing that I really enjoyed about this movie was the set pieces and the costume design. That's something I usually never really highlight, but I fairly enjoyed that for the most part here. The camera work was pretty nice. I would say overall it was good. Like I said, it wasn't a waste of time, but it's definitely not something where everyone here is saying, oh my gosh, you have to go out and see this. I would say wait for HBO Max at the most. It's not a waste of time if you watched it there, but it's definitely not something I would necessarily go to the theater for. It's kind of weird that 2023 really ended on a Wonka movie, and it's actually doing pretty surprisingly well, but I just hope 2024 will give us something better. But I mean, looking at the list, it's just sequels after remakes, and I'm really not thinking this year is going to be that great.
Nintendo, one of the most nostalgic-filled companies that have so many of the best and some of the most unique ways to experience video games. Sometimes. The Virtual Boy. Another word for embarrassment.
When it comes to the Virtual Boy, I have always wanted to try one of these out, or own one possibly, since I started game collecting nearly 15 years ago. The problem is the Virtual Boy has always been expensive or just not worth enough to really get into. Of course you can emulate this kind of stuff, but I always found it cooler to play stuff on the original hardware and how it was supposed to be played originally. I was sent this collection by a fan of the channel, and so I deeply appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Without this, I would have possibly never been able to experience this or make a video on it, so I am very grateful.
Anyways, the Virtual Boy, one of Nintendo's biggest laughingstocks when it comes to sales numbers. Over 770,000 units were sold. To put that into perspective, console add-ons like the Sega CD or 32X or Nintendo's own Famicom Disk System, which only released in Japan, outsold this monstrosity of chicken legs. So why? Why specifically did this console, compared to others, flop? So let's take a step back and see why.
To really understand the Virtual Boy, we need to get into Nintendo's mindset before all this. Nintendo was on top of the world in the 80s and 90s, having sold an impressive amount of NES consoles, portable Game Boys, and Super Nintendos. Mario was now more popular than ever with an upcoming live-action movie. They had successfully beaten Sega at the 16-bit console wars with impressive 3D games such as Star Fox and Donkey Kong Country. And Nintendo had always been innovating, even when it came to 3D stuff. They had always been into the 3D gimmick for longer than you might think, starting all the way back on the Famicom, the Japanese NES. This is the Famicom 3D system. It was used to play 3D stereoscopic games, but it was a commercial flop, only having 7 compatible games released for the device. Other companies were trying to get their hand into the 3D market. I mean, Sega even tried to dip their hand into it with their own virtual reality headset, announced in 1991, but it never made it to market. The only headset that truly made it into some people's hands was the Virtuality. This was released and was sort of an attraction in arcades and theme parks where guests could pay a sum and experience virtual reality. Sort of similar to the stuff you see nowadays in malls and at Dave & Buster's. The headsets were bulky looking, and while producing a VR experience, people complained about the resolution mostly, and because of how expensive it was, the company went bankrupt in 1997. Atari even announced a virtual reality headset in response to the Virtual Boy for their own Atari Jaguar, but plans were quickly scrapped and abandoned as well. That's mostly what would happen with virtual reality in the early days. A company might announce their foot in the door with one, only to backpedal after they see how the cost of doing so. So now we come to this. How does a company that was at their peak turn out a product that sells less than 1 million units?
Well, let's see. Despite being called the Virtual Boy, this is not a virtual reality headset. This utilizes and displays stereoscopic 3D. The designer of the Virtual Boy, Gunpei Yokoi, was one of Nintendo's finest in the early days, and he was a huge part in the success of games and consoles. He was the person who thought of the 2-player idea for Mario Bros. He produced titles such as Kid Icarus, Duck Hunt, Tetris, Metroid, and Wrecking Crew. He designed Rob the Robot and created the Game & Watch line for Nintendo, and as well as the original Game Boy. Gunpei Yokoi was a genius, and his games and designs can still be seen to this day. The Virtual Boy was one of his last designs before he sadly left Nintendo in 1996 after the Virtual Boy's failure, and then a year later on October 4th, 1997, he died after being hit by a car. The development and lead up to the Virtual Boy is pretty interesting. Not only was it rushed out the door, but it was surprisingly received to a very poor reception. To start with, there was this tech being developed that was a red LED eyepiece display. The company only had a prototype developed, but they took this to about every company to see if they could license it out for them. But almost everyone refused it due to the colors and concerns about motion sickness. And then there's Nintendo and Gunpei Yokoi. They took it upon themselves to make a game console out of this. When it came to the lead-up and announcement of the Virtual Boy, it was kinda weird. Nintendo never made it out that this was the Game Boy's successor and that you had to buy this or you'll be missing out. It never felt like there was this giant lead-up or hype, if that makes sense. If there was, it was very small. Even when Nintendo first showed off the system at trade shows, people were complaining about headaches, the red and black color scheme, and how you even played the system. It was obvious that it needed more time in the oven, but Nintendo pushed it to have it be released so that they could have something on the market, and then they could have all hands on deck for their brand new Nintendo 64 console. The Virtual Boy, it was marketed in a weird way. Nintendo was going through their edgy phase at this, and all their commercials were like this monster movie with the Virtual Boy looking for victims. I think the only bad thing is that the console, you need to play it to experience it. It wasn't like the Game Boy where it's like, oh, Mario on the go. The Virtual Boy, it launched on July 21st in Japan and August 14, 1995 in North America for a high price of $180. That's about $360 today. It wasn't cheap, which was usually the appealing thing about Nintendo. Only 14 games were made for the system in North America and only 19 in Japan.
Say what you want about the actual console itself, but who knows? Maybe with a better lineup of games and better support from third party, the Virtual Boy could have done a lot better.
In the end, the Virtual Boy was very poorly received by practically everyone, and by the next year,
stores were selling them at practically nothing. Today, the Virtual Boy, it's still thrown into the history of Nintendo, and it's acknowledged still to this day, through little ways such as Tomodachi Life, Super Smash Bros., or even the new Luigi's Mansion 3. But it will always remain as Nintendo's worst-selling console of all time. Fans have even taken it upon themselves to have fan games made, ROMs, or fan patches and translations, and you can actually play these on an actual unit. That's pretty cool. But I guess that begs the question, is it really as bad as everyone makes it out to be? So let's actually take a look at the console, because compared to a lot of Nintendo's other systems, there's some oddities here. For starters, the way that you power the system on is through the controller. You won't be finding a power indicator on the console like you'd expect. This is also how you plug the console in as well, from the back of the controller. You can power it through two different ways. One is through the battery pack, which uses 6 AA batteries, but you'd be lucky to maybe get 3 hours of battery life. So much for portability. The second was an AC adapter. It was sold separately and is the preferred method, obviously. Why was this marketed as a portable console? As for the rest of the controller, I find it to be very comfortable. I have small and skinny hands, so I can be picky at times when it comes to how a controller feels. And this just fits so nicely in my hands. There's 4 face buttons, an A and a B, as well as a start and select. My only issue with this is that sometimes I have to get out of my game and look down. There really should have been some form of convexity, or perhaps some form of bumps to indicate that you were pressing select. Probably the most unique thing about the Virtual Boy is that it has dual D-pads, which makes sense when we're talking about 3D games here. But the bad thing is that only a few of the library actually utilizes that second D-pad. Compared to other D-pads as well, it's a tiny bit different. It feels like it has less draw and it's more sensitive than compared to a Super Nintendo or even an NES controller. I really like the feel of them. Finally though, on the back we have 2 shoulder buttons or triggers which feel really nice and clicky. While the controller definitely isn't perfect, I'd like to think of it as one of the most comfortable I've actually held. The shape of it kind of reminds me of the N64 or the GameCube controller design. Moving over to what's on the console, we have a volume slider here that controls the stereo sound. This thing can get very loud. A headphone jack, controller port, and an extension port which uses nothing. Usually this would be the home for a link cable to link 2 Virtual Boys together for multiplayer play like the Game Boy did. Funny story though, the link cable was never released. The game card slot here is on the bottom back, just like all the other Nintendo portable consoles. The only difference is they go in weird. Usually you insert a game card with the front picture facing away from the user, but here it's flipped. Weird. On top of the console we have 2 switches. This is the IPD dial, or the inner pupil distance dial. This is what adjusts the distance for your specific eyes. It's a lot like adjusting binoculars, for example. Above that is the focus slider, which can be used to adjust to give the picture a more sharp or clear picture. If you're having issues with your console, there's a way to check if it has a problem though with the lenses. When starting up a game, press these buttons on the right side of the controller. Left, B, down, A, up. If your Virtual Boy is fine, it'll look exactly like mine. When it comes to the design of the Virtual Boy, it looks a lot like a modern virtual reality headset, but there was never actually a head mount released. There were plans. But the main reason the Virtual Boy was designed with these legs was told by Gunpei Yokoi in an interview with Edge magazine in 1995. He said this: "We also considered the fact that if a woman wearing makeup was to use the head-mounted design, the next person might be hesitant in wearing it. So, we changed the design so that you can just look into the viewing apparatus and still appreciate the 3D experience." I can sort of understand that a little, but at the same time, it is a little weird to take that into consideration as well. So instead, now all you do is you slot on the Virtual Boy and now you're ready to play. This looks unfinished! But if I had to be honest,
no, Zeth, wait!
It's not as bad as people say. When I see this, I think it looks unfinished, yes, but it's not completely unappealing. When I would see one or an image of one, it drew me to want to try to play it. Never where I thought it was too ugly or weird to try it out. So let's do that. I got a stack of games, let's play a handful of the library. One final thing that's a bit weird about the Virtual Boy are the cartridges. Compared to the Game Boys, these are big and thinner. They also have exposed pins, so they all come with this dust cover. Again, it's just weird. All this just feels like I'm using a prototype rather than a fully manufactured and built product. When you actually play a Virtual Boy, it doesn't surround the viewer like you would think with a traditional VR headset. It more so plays it in a box in front of you. Think playing a 3DS in the dark with a red and black screen. That's the Virtual Boy. The 3D works, don't get me wrong, but it does vary from game to game. To start with, Mario's Tennis released on July 21st in Japan and August 14th, 1995 in America. To start with, we're asked a prompt about turning on or off the automatic pause. Yeah, that whole why not go take a break can be linked all the way back to this and Earthbound as well, surprisingly enough. So Mario's Tennis starts with one of those weird dreams you get right before you wake up. There's two options to select singles or doubles. You select the mode, level, and how long the match is. This is extremely bare bones, even for a tennis game. There's no two-player option, this is a solo romp only. There are 7 characters to choose from: Mario, Luigi, Princess Toadstool, Yoshi, Toad, Koopa, and Donkey Kong Jr. While most people say that there's no difference between them all, you have to select the hard difficulty to really notice it. There's speed differences and racket coverage differences. Characters like Mario and Luigi are built almost the same, while someone like Toad and Koopa are fast and slow, but also have bad and great racket coverage. When selecting the doubles option as well, these stats all come into play. But there's really no feeling of difference if I'm being honest. You can select any one of the characters and it just feels like you're playing the exact same person. There's really no difference or advantage if you played Toadstool compared to Donkey Kong Jr. The 3D effect does work though, surprisingly. It helps judge the distance between where it is in comparison to your character. The sprite work here is nice and the characters are nice and big. But what else can I really say though? You can't choose the court, there's only minor differences, and that being the background changes. Ooh. I mean, yeah, sure, if you want to be specific, it's cool that this was the first Mario-labeled sports title, but it definitely feels like it. The music is nice, but nothing super memorable. Mario's Tennis just boils down to it feels like a pack-in game, but it doesn't do a very good job at selling the Virtual Boy. This isn't a Wii Sports moment where it clicks with you. It's just a bare-bones experience that's just tennis. It's okay, I guess, but nothing that I'd be running to tell a friend about.
Dude, you have to try this. It's tennis.
Next up is Red Alarm, released on July 21st in Japan and August 14, 1995 in North America. Developed by T&E Soft, they were one of the only third-party Virtual Boy developers. It's a 3D polygon shooter similar to something like Star Fox, except due to the limitations of the console, they had to opt for this wireframe look. It sort of looks similar to the Vectrix graphics on Atari's Battlezone, except you'd probably have more fun with Battlezone to be honest. Red Alarm could have been a decent game on Super Nintendo or Nintendo 64. What the main problem is the wireframe design. Yes, on an actual Virtual Boy, it's a bit easier than probably what you're watching. But at times, I still can't determine what is something I can fly through or under or around. And add all the junk on the screen and the words with stuff flying all around you, it's just a frustrating time. If it had a more simple look to the stage, perhaps this could have been good. But half the time, I just don't know what I'm looking at. The logos, the stage, the ship, it all blends together. The music is just awful in my opinion, and it makes me want to turn the system down. It's just a garbled mess of chiptunes and sound effects. Red Alarm overall is nothing unplayable, but there's nothing drawing me to want to play it again. It's unimaginative, boring, and it overall just makes my eyes feel like they've been waterboarded. Galactic Pinball released on July 21st in Japan and August 14, 1995 in North America. When it comes to pinball, I have always been fascinated by how they work and the history behind the machines. Not so much with digital pinball games. Galactic Pinball feels like a glorified port of the 3D Pinball Space Cadet game on Windows. Sad to say, it's just pinball. No false marketing here. You can either use the D-pads or the back bumpers to move your paddles. I gotta say here, the back paddles, they feel nice to use. It sort of feels like I'm using an actual machine. The bad thing here is the physics. They can be a bit wonky. It doesn't feel great. Even something like Pinbot or Pinball on the NES feel leagues better than this. There's only 4 boards to choose from, and they all feel very similar. Each of them have a little gimmick though if you knock a ball in the right area. One has you shooting asteroids, another defeating an alien, or playing as Samus' ship from Metroid. The 3D effect here isn't very appealing and doesn't work all too well. This is another one where I want to rub my eyes after a few minutes of playtime. The music here is actually okay though. Galactic Pinball is just kind of a waste of time here. It's not impressive or appealing enough to really want to go back to. Virtual League Baseball, developed by Kemco and released on August 11 in Japan and September 11, 1995 in North America. I think that this is a good time to bring up that the Virtual Boy is actually region-free. So here I have the Japanese version of this game, and it works just fine on a North American system.
This game is horrible!
There's really no difference between the two, only that with the Japanese version the characters are cartoony, while here we have in North America we got more realistic players. The graphics here are nice and appealing actually, with the 3D working surprisingly well for this title. The music when the game is loading too is very nice. The bad thing is, it all comes down to the gameplay. Everything is off. When you swing a bat, I never can seem to hit it properly. When you're pitching, the opponent can always get a hit, and if a ball gets sent to the outfield, your players are just way too slow. By the time you grab a ball, the player has already gone home. Overall, Virtual League Baseball is a lot like other games on the Virtual Boy. Forgettable. Nestor's Funky Bowling, released in February 1996. This was only made available in North America, and it was the second to last Virtual Boy game released here. Nestor's Funky Bowling is a game that makes me question life. Out of all the games on this list, this feels the most bare bones. Imagine paying $40 for this. All it is, it's bowling without any funk to it. You can get through a game in less than 2 minutes and then it's game over. You can choose between Nestor and his sister Hester, but there's really no differences here. And all you do is line up the bowler, press A, over and over and over again. The 3D effect here works, but there's nothing really noteworthy or special about it. There's no power-ups, different lanes, or items. It's just bowling. Nestor's Funky Bowling. More like Nestor's fictitious no-nonsense bowling. Golf, or T&E Virtual Golf, released on August 11 in Japan and in North America in 1995. I actually think that this game looks impressive, and could have passed for an early PS1 title if it wasn't for the colors. There are problems though with the game, and one stems from the 3D effect. While it works for the most part compared to other titles, I feel like every so often I'm looking cross-eyed. Sometimes when trying to tee up and look at what's in the foreground, my eyes can't focus on that and they shift to what's behind it. Another thing is that this at the time was meant to be the brand new cutting-edge video game system that was technically more powerful than a Super Nintendo in some ways, and in this game, there's only 18 holes. That's the same amount as Golf on the NES. Golf on the Game Boy had double the amount. I mean, it's not that big of a deal, but it's definitely not impressive, and not something that would make someone go, "Oh, I need to go out and buy a Virtual Boy." For golf.
Golf.
And so far, that's been the way with all the titles I've played so far. Some are fun maybe for 10 or so minutes, but not something that you would want to go out and have to buy this console to play this game. One more game to try out from the stack, a palate cleanser for sure. Virtual Boy Wario Land, released on November 27 in Japan and December 1st, 1995 in North America. When it comes to Wario games, I'm a massive fan of the greedy little guy. One of my favorite games of all time is Wario World on the GameCube. I mostly played all the previous titles on the 3DS Virtual Console, but this one has always escaped me because I've always wanted to play it on an actual unit. No emulation. Technically, too, what's funny is that this is Wario Land 2, as it came out before the actual Wario Land 2. While Wario Land 2 shook up the franchise and turned it less into a Mario spin-off series and more into its own thing, Virtual Boy Wario Land is more in line with its predecessor. There's floating blocks and Wario can actually die. This is a good game. No, a great game. First and foremost, it's a Wario Land game. Get to the exit and collect as much treasure as you can along the way. Some things to note are that you actually use the back bumper to run, and then B for the action of your side bump. This is by far the best and most impressive Virtual Boy game, that while the 3D isn't necessary, it's still really cool. It's sort of in the same sense as those 3D classics that Sega came out with or Kirby's 3D Adventure. Wario's model has dimension to him as well as the world around him. You're able to hop between the stage at points in the background. And sometimes enemies even pop out at you or in your face. This overall is a game. The other games that I've discussed feel more like quick bite-sized experiences, and while Wario Land can be beaten pretty quickly, there's only about 14 stages, the game still feels fully fleshed out and polished. It doesn't feel like some demo that was fully packaged and shipped. I love this game, and I think that if you have to get a Virtual Boy or want to experience some of the games, this is the one game I personally recommend and enjoyed the most. I understand I'm missing some of the more key titles like Mario Clash, Jack Bros, and Telro Boxer, But if I don't have them, I can't review them fully. Maybe in the future we can come back and do more in-depth reviews or have some of the titles I'm missing. But for now, I'm very grateful that I was able to experience this console. This is something that I've wanted to try for a long time and I just couldn't get my hands on. I don't think the Virtual Boy is as bad as people say it is. Sure, it's an unfinished and rushed product that hardly has any appealing or worthwhile games, but it's still kinda cool. This was one of the first virtual reality headsets to be sold and marketed. As a video game collector, this is my holy grail item of my collection now. But that's basically all that it's good for. Collectors. Honestly, if you're wanting to try out a few of the games, emulation is nothing to be ashamed of here. Wario Land is the only one that I'd say is even worth your time doing that. Overall, the Virtual Boy is a weird mark on Nintendo's history, and its failures can be linked to multiple different issues. This is not the worst thing in the world, by far, and there are very impressive things about it, but overall, it definitely could have used a few more years in the oven if Nintendo really wanted to go all in with this product. Hey, this is just my quick thoughts and a review on the black and white cut of Godzilla Minus One minus color. And honestly, if you're a Godzilla fan, if you love Godzilla Minus One, I say go out and watch this. Is this something where if you haven't watched the movie yet, I don't think you necessarily have to see this black and white cut of the movie, but if you've already seen the original movie in color, definitely go out and give this a watch. This is kind of a special black and white cut of the movie because usually when it comes to these frou-frou nonsense, you know, let's take the saturation down or let's do a special black and white cut of it. You know, you can easily tell that some things just doesn't work in black and white. However, Godzilla Minus One minus color, I believe, is the definitive way to watch Godzilla Minus One. There are some scenes that didn't quite work for me in black and white, and honestly, I thought it'd be really cool if when Godzilla's beam was charging up, that would be the only thing that was in color. That would have been fantastic. But the entire movie is in black and white, and honestly, it feels like a sequel to the original 1954 Gojira film. I think that the things that really added to this black and white cut of it were the water scenes mostly, especially that one scene where Godzilla's chasing the boat. That looked scary in black and white. I didn't really think Minus One was scary like a lot of people thought of it. I more so thought like, ooh, this is kind of a good like thriller movie almost. The black and white cut of this movie is a straight up horror film now. That first beginning part when they're on Oda Island is now a straight up horror film. And actually, the music that accompanies a lot of these scenes now, I was able to really pick apart and really appreciate more because of the black and white cut of this movie, surprisingly enough. But those are just my brief thoughts. I really hope that the black and white cut is available on the Blu-ray once that comes out. We'll see when that is. But for now, definitely go check this out if you haven't had the chance. Steven Spielberg is one of, if not the most influential director of all time. From massive blockbusters to his more heartfelt and personal stories, Spielberg is a wizard in the film industry and needs no introduction whatsoever. When it comes to his movies, while some of them are highly praised and remembered and loved, some are forgotten about when you mention his name and are arguably some of his best movies in my opinion. Ones like War Horse, The Terminal, Always, and of course, The Adventures of Tintin. Tintin is one of the most popular European comics that his influences spread across everywhere. It's also one of the oldest, first being published back in 1929, making it almost 100 years old at this time. Tintin is a series I was not entirely aware of until the 2011 movie. When I saw it in the theater, I instantly became a fan. My dad had to drag me to this movie because, honestly, I didn't know if it was going to be good or not, but frankly, this became one of my favorite movies when I was a child, and I honestly just became a fan of Tintin right after that. I was renting out the comics, I was going to the library constantly trying to find all the issues. I watched the 1958 and the 1991 cartoons, as well as the 5 films that tried to capture Hergé's world, but they never really came close in my opinion. While some stuff would work, like the voices, or for instance even in the 1991 animated series, it looked very similar to the comic book artwork. best way to describe Tintin is really like Indiana Jones for kids. There's always some MacGuffin or mystery that surrounds the entire story that's being told.
The way that Hergé wrote and illustrated his characters were so entertaining. You could easily fill in the blanks between the pages. My favorites were always Thompson and Thompson, the two incompetent detectives who are always being bumbling idiots.
Great Scotland Yard! Oh, that's extraordinary. What is? Worthington's have a half-price sale on bowler hats.
Tintin is a series that I've been a fan of now for the last 15 years almost, and honestly, it's something that I come back to regularly.
For a long-time fan of the series, I can't imagine what they thought of the movie here. For me, I consider it one of Spielberg's best movies that he's ever directed, and makes me wonder why he's not done more cartoons. While Spielberg has always had his hand in some kids' properties, such as his own directed movie Hook or E.T., he has been an executive producer on a lot of children's cartoons. But other than Tintin, he has never directed another one. Not to say that Tintin is childish, because it does get away with a lot for a recent PG rating. But the way that the Adventures of Tintin is shot and directed is amazing, and it takes full advantage of his cartoony world. It can be a grounded movie at times, but it's never afraid to have the wacky antics that have its characters look like they were ripped from a Looney Tunes short.
The thing about movies that usually is one of the most important things that usually never gets discussed about a lot is its editing and its transitions. That's so important to movies.
When a movie has poor editing or transitions, it can suck you right out of the world that has been built up. It's not just an action scene. Two people talking can have poor editing and have way too many cuts.
I think we can go for it.
For instance, there's a scene in the movie where Tintin is first introduced to the character Captain Haddock. The scene is about 2.5 minutes long, and it only contains 8 cuts. There is a lot going on in this scene, from the introduction to the main character, a sword fight, and a complex background that tells the story of Haddock, and it all is contained in 8 cuts.
Oh, you thought you could sneak in behind me and catch me with my trousers down, huh?
There's another scene later on that's an action set piece that's a one-shot take. This is one of my favorite shots of all time, and it lasts roughly 4 minutes, and it's just beautiful. The scene starts at the top of this dam that's blown up, and the main characters have to rush to get to the bottom of it, and along the way they have every wacky scenario that occurs, from a tank driving through a hotel, Snowy launching himself with a hawk, and Tintin driving a motorcycle through a building that's all crumbling around him. The whole scene is incredible.
Did you hit anything? Oh dear.
Editing is something I usually don't gush about, but in all honesty, the transitions that this movie makes are astounding. One of my favorite shots is when Haddock and Tintin are stuck in the Sahara, and he's recounting the tale of Sir Francis Haddock, and the tale begins to morph into the scene. The same details I mentioned before about cuts applies to this whole scene as well. Long takes and wide shots. You miss none of the action and understand everything that is occurring. I think the thing, though, that elevates this movie a lot is the score. John Williams is here, and it's more of a subtle that he's doing than these big, sweeping scores. They're in here, but most of the soundtrack is little musical motifs that slowly build over time.
The process of making those films is something quite different. We recorded some of the music early on when the graphics were just beginning to be drawn, and what I actually hoped to try to do was in some of the action sequences to create maybe what is an old Disney technique of doing the music first and then have the animators animate to the silhouette of what the music is doing.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. If a movie has a poor story or poor characters, I'm most likely not going to enjoy it. The movie mostly took from the books The Crab with the Golden Claws, The Secret of the Unicorn, and Red Rackham's Treasure, and the story mostly sticks to it very, very closely. The only major difference is that the villain wasn't the villain in the comic book. Sakharine wasn't even a main character. But here in the movie, he's been beefed up to not only the main antagonist, but also as a descendant of Red Rackham.
Show yourself, Red Rackham!
The acting in this movie is absolutely fantastic. Going back to Sakharine, he's played by Daniel Craig, and he's doing a superb job. It might just be me, but his performance is almost unrecognizable and makes for an excellent hateable villain. But of course, the movie stands on the shoulders of the two main leads, Haddock and Tintin, played by Andy Serkis and Jamie Bell. Jamie Bell does a perfect job capturing the adventurous spirit that Tintin had in the comics. Things can get out of hand for him, but you always can tell that he has a backup plan or that he has a lot of street knowledge for his age.
By far my favorite character here is Haddock. You know, when he's on screen, he has this commanding presence that just steals everything from the show, no matter what. And I'm glad that they included him in the movie, because there was a period of time where Tintin was kind of a solo adventurer there for a minute in the comics.
But Andy Serkis here embodies the character in such a great way, bringing the original panels to life.
Tintin, we're saved. Oh, water! Water!
Stop! Captain! Just a mirage!
It was here.
The Adventures of Tintin probably has one of the most exciting stories that Spielberg has told on the screen, with some very impressive action set sequences. We already talked about the one-shot take, but seriously, it's just impressive that a scene like this can exist. My other favorite part is when Haddock is recounting the tale of the unicorn and the pirate ship fight is insane in this movie, especially when the two boats get entangled together and the enemy ship literally swings above the other. Spielberg here is at his finest. Even when it comes to the graphics here, they're still phenomenal. The characters aren't stiff like a lot of the previous motion capture films. They're still full of life and they feel like a real person, not a group of pixels. You can see the pores on the faces and even the little fine hairs. It's incredible how this has held up to this day.
Tintin, in my opinion, holds up to this day spectacularly, and I consider it one of Steven Spielberg's best directed movies. In fact, I'd go so far as to say it's one of the best comic book movies ever made. That being said, it does have one glaring issue, however.
The movie was directed by Steven Spielberg and produced by Peter Jackson. This was meant to be the jumping off point of a trilogy with Jackson and Spielberg swapping places. So, The Adventures of Tintin, it ends on a suo cliffhanger. It's not bad, it never takes away from the film, but it makes me mad that we never got a sequel to this. This could have been the next Indiana Jones trilogy, but we just ended up with one great movie.
If you haven't watched The Adventures of Tintin, I highly implore you to go out and find a copy of it, or to possibly even pour over the original comics that Hergé wrote. If we ever get a sequel in the future, which I really don't think we will, I think this is kind of like an Acceleracers type deal where we're just never going to get a sequel, honestly. But, you know, if we do get a sequel, I will be the first in line to watch it.
The best way to play this game, in my opinion, is when you're alone and secluded, when it's dark outside and it's nighttime, with nothing but the light of the TV illuminating your face.
Perfect. I'm all done explaining why Galaxy 1 is so great.
You're not done yet.
What do you mean?
You never talked about it being two-player, the power-ups, or even how much better the soundtrack is.
Okay.
Galaxy, as I have stated, is one of my favorite games of all time, and most of that can be attributed to the atmosphere that the game throws at you. I mean, let's just look at the first level here, Good Egg Galaxy. The level is just dripping in this with its music and its atmosphere. It's not too hard, but it's not too easy. Everything is enveloped in darkness, making Mario feel so small and tiny in the great wonder of space. And when that music hits, oh man, you're just ready for anything. As I've stated, this is the tutorial level basically, and it serves as a way to show really how the camera can flip all around, how Mario's moveset differs now from his previous entries. But here's the thing, this took me and my dad hours to beat. First of all, this was one of the first games we had ever played as in terms of a relatively new console. So not only was Mario's moveset just not in our headspace, but it was also the Wii controls themselves. This was one of the first games we played on the console, and most of the time spent on this level can be linked to one stupid, idiotic thing: the boss. Yeah, I don't know why it took us forever to beat this boss, but honestly, we had no idea what we were doing. We tried everything from ground pounding on the stupid thing, spinning on the egg, but nothing actually worked. I mean, we were even looking in the manual for clues. And I mean, at this point in time, remember, the internet really wasn't a thing for most people still. We're being dead serious. Pee-wee Piranha took us hours to beat, but once we accidentally did, we were off to the races.
Skill issue.
The main hub, as I have said, there's really not much to explore unlike Sunshine's Delfino Plaza, but the music and atmosphere makes up for it. Super Mario Sunshine had the plaza enveloped in darkness until you collected more shines, and then the plaza started to have more life to it. Same applies to the Comet Observatory though. The more stars you bring back, the more full of life the ship becomes and less lonely. When you first land, it's just you, Rosalina, and one other star with almost the whole ship blacked out. But later down the road, the ship powers itself more, the place becomes less desolate, your Toad friends set up shop, Luigi joins the crew, and more stars fly around the place, giving it a homey atmosphere. And of course, the music is fantastic as always. This is the kind of waltz you want at a wedding. One of my favorite aspects of Galaxy is actually the power-ups. This is the first 3D Mario game to integrate the traditional power-up system seen in the 2D games. Yes, 64 had power-ups, but they were all dedicated to different types of hats, not mushrooms or flowers like they are here. In Galaxy, we have some of the most assorted and crazy power-ups ever conceived of. I love how they all look. The Beam Mushroom is just so much fun. You can fly around and stick to special parts of the level. The Spring Mushroom was such a pain in the butt to control, but makes up for some of the most best level design in the Toy Time Galaxy. I love how a lot of the power-ups here also have a time limit. It never feels like Mario is overpowered with things, like with the Fire Flower or the Ice Flower. Which, the Ice Flower here is really cool. You can skate on the water and move around faster. Probably the coolest power-up conceptually is the Red Star. You have it unlocked closer to the end of the game, and there's only one time that it's actually utilized though. The Red Star could have had so many cool levels built around it, but you don't really use it that often. I loved, however, when you unlock it in the main hub and you could fly all around. I remember doing this constantly as a kid. If you're feeling lonely, however, Galaxy was the first 3D Mario game to include a 2-player mode.
About time I get to play.
Hooking up a second remote allows the user to be this little star icon, and you can hold enemies in place or collect star bits. That's about it.
You mean to tell me that's it?
Yeah, when I put it that way, it seems pretty lame, but for someone like me who had barely played any video games up to that point, it was perfect for me. So not only could I watch Dad play, but I could feel like I was helping him in the process by collecting the star bits or maybe holding an enemy possibly. Some of my favorite galaxies in the game are the more laid-back ones, like the Beach Bowl Galaxy. Here, you're just hanging out with a bunch of penguins, and the music just takes me back to being a little kid. Honey Hive Galaxy and the Gold Leaf Galaxy is another one where I adore the music. It's more laid back and bouncy. Space Junk Galaxy is just a neat concept in general. The Stingray races, or how the ball levels were such a pain in the butt, but now they're still really fun to go back to and try to get a faster score. And now Gusty Garden. This is that powerful, triumphant music that tells you, oh yeah, I'm playing Super Mario Galaxy. When I heard it in the theater being a part of all the other themes incorporated in the Mario movie, I almost got misty-eyed.
I too almost got emotional.
Really? So you felt that sense of wonder when one of the best Mario themes was cranked to the max in a theater?
No, it was angry Bowser didn't marry Peach.
One of the things that I can't believe now is that you can play this game portably. Back in 2007, I'd have killed for this sort of thing. I had a Game Boy Advance, so the best that I had was Pac-Man. But even though there are some issues like how you can pull Mario or collect star bits, it's Super Mario Galaxy on the go. But, you know, when it comes to Super Mario Galaxy, there is so much to pick apart and discuss and talk about when it comes to your favorite moments, levels, and characters. There's a reason so many people love this game and treasure it. I remember when we finally opened up the final level and it took forever to beat Bowser.
but once we did, it felt so amazing. Or one of my favorite memories too was when there was a bad snow day and my dad couldn't go to work, but I had to go to school. And when I got back, my dad had discovered the green stars and how they work.
Putting almost everything into words that I enjoy about this game is almost impossible. I can't.
Yeah, it was pretty good. But there's one more.
Hey y'all, Zeth here. I remember it so you don't have to. Currently I'm compiling a list of Japanese kaiju based on smell. Don't question. I'd say King Caesar is a solid F, while Anguirus... give him a solid A.
So originally I was going to make 5 separate videos covering the history of Godzilla. The thing is, my script was long and overdrawn. We're talking over 1,000 pages just for one of these videos, and I would have probably not even been ready till late 2024. So instead, this entire year is the 70th anniversary of Godzilla. And to commemorate that, I have taken it upon myself to have a retrospective on every single movie that's a part of Toho's legendary franchise. Once every single video is complete, I can re-edit them into their respective eras. I'm not promising or saying that there's an order I'll have. One week it might be a Showa movie and the next it might be a MonsterVerse one. Godzilla is my favorite franchise of all time. So to celebrate his 70th anniversary, let's kick it off with one of my personal favorites, 1989's Godzilla vs. Biollante.
When it comes to Godzilla fans, most of us point to the 1954 film, or even something like Shin Godzilla as being one of the best. I'm not one of those people.
Those movies are good and they have their place, don't get me wrong, but Godzilla vs. Biollante is one of the most overlooked and forgotten Godzilla films. It has some of my favorite moments in the franchise's history, and honestly, the poster for it scared the crap out of me as a kid. Godzilla VHS cover tapes are awesome, and this image was always way more better than the one with the suits. That goes for almost all of the Heisei era art. Godzilla vs. Biollante was the second in the Heisei era of the series, coming after the Return of Godzilla or Godzilla 1985. I always remember Godzilla vs. Biollante as being one of the strongest that the franchise has put out, and one of the most unique. As someone who grew up watching these movies and can quote them inside out and backwards, I'm kind of sick of the reused monsters now. You know the main 3, Rodan, Mothra, and King Ghidorah. I know it's weird to say this in the fandom space, but it's almost always that now. It's nice when there's a new cool spin on them, but my favorite monsters have always been the ones that show up only once or twice in the series, and Biollante is one that has never appeared again. After this, there was only a little bit of archive footage in Space Godzilla, and it's the story explanation for his birth.
There were only 2 occasions when G-cells were sent into outer space. 1, a fragment of Biollante, and 2, Godzilla's flesh attached to Mothra.
Biollante's appeared in comics, books, and games, but I want Biollante to return officially. That's what they should have done in the aftermath of that Jet Jaguar short. The two shake hands as a new threat appears. Seriously, why is it always King Ghidorah? Anyways, why is Godzilla vs. Biollante so good and underrated? Well, I think to start, it's because it's one of the strangest Godzilla movies. You either love this one or you hate it. I've never heard anything in between. This is also rare in that it's a direct sequel to The Return of Godzilla. While that goes for all of the Heisei films, at this point and even later ones with the Showa era or even the Millennium era, Godzilla would have sequels, but then they would have the ones that would branch off or be its own thing. What's cool about the Heisei era is that you can start from The Return of Godzilla and go all the way up to Godzilla vs. Destroyer, and it has a consistent story about this specific Godzilla. For a sequel, Godzilla vs. Biollante does everything right and what a Godzilla movie should do. More interesting and better characters, a unique monster for Godzilla to fight in ways we have never seen before, a score to rival that of Inception, with one of the songs becoming a meme recently. I have always loved the score for Biollante. Koichi Sugiyama was the film's composer, and while this is his only Godzilla film he composed solely, he had worked in the past on Godzilla vs. Hedorah using the Defeat Hedorah theme song specifically.
Other than that, he's known for one series in particular, scoring the entire mainline series. That's right, the series composer of Dragon Quest, one of, if not the most popular role-playing game of all time. Once you have that in mind, this soundtrack makes a whole lot more sense. It's kind of a weird combination where it can be fun and over the top, to devastating, chaotic, and horrifying. It fits the tone of the film amazingly, and it also used the original themes from Akira Ikefube in some of the best ways any Godzilla movie has utilized them.
Well, that's great. All right, now, children, let us see what you dreamed of, okay?
When it comes to the story of the development, it's pretty interesting. After the marginal success of The Return of Godzilla in 1984, Toho held a public writing contest for the sequel. From it was born an entry from a dentist, out of all people, Shinichiro Kobayashi, which wasn't his first time doing this. Back in high school, he had submitted nearly 13 monster designs and story ideas, which one was selected for a Return of Ultraman episode, and he also wrote a draft for a film later too called Godzilla vs. Neo Godzilla, which built upon the Godzilla vs. Astro Godzilla idea. His story idea for Biollante has a few differences from the movie we have now. For starters, while the Frankenstein monster experiments from Dr. Shiragami are relatively the same, there was going to be another monster called Deuteolus. It was basically a giant rat monster that was a mix of animal and fish DNA, and it went on a rampage earlier on in the film and was killed and eaten by Godzilla. But now in the final film is now the Rose form battle and the Super X fight, which I'm glad because the Rose form of Biollante is one of my favorite kaiju and it is terrifying. Biollante was also just a mix of Erica and plant DNA, not Godzilla cells. Biollante would have had a more human face as well during the final instead of the crocodile Venus flytrap look that we have. If you're wanting to see some amazing artwork, check out some of the pre-production art of Biollante's design. It's always cool to see how Toho's designs evolve over time, especially with this kaiju. There was going to be some journalist character that we followed as well who would have had psychic visions over the course of the film that leads to her confronting Dr. Shiragami for his horrific creations. This was replaced with the character Miki Sagusa, who would appear in every remaining Heisei Godzilla movie. I think that while some of this stuff is cool to read about, I think the Dr. Shiragami that we have in the final movie is way better. Here, yes, in the original script he's lost his mind after the death of his daughter, but now he's turned more into a villain with the creation of more than one monster. I like how in the final film, while yes, he's crazy, he's constructed and mixed plant, Godzilla, and human cells, you see more so of how it was just this accident and science gone wrong. He's more so a fallen hero in the final film. Same goes for the rat creature. Sure, it's cool when Godzilla fights two totally different monsters, but man, that Rose battle is still one of my favorite fights that Godzilla has, and it really shows off the skills of the Suitmation and VFX crew. They thought that they wouldn't be able to do some of this stuff in the script with practical suits, so they did some stop motion which was left on the cutting room floor after special effects director Koichi Kawakita thought that they failed to blend in with the live action footage. Other cutscenes were once Godzilla defeated Biollante's Rhodes stage, the spores would have covered the hillside and begin blooming in the fields. The reason that this was cut, though, was due to the flowers being out of scale, which, I guess it's a little silly, I don't know, monster flowers? Who cares? It's a pretty good scene, and it shows a little bit of character of Godzilla. Another cutscene was, too, when they were going to use animation for Biollante consuming Godzilla near the end of the film. The director of Godzilla vs. Biollante would take the next 3 years to modify the dentist's story into a script while working on other Toho movies. Now, when it comes to Biollante and filming, it was actually quite difficult with the forms. While the Rose form's head was easy for the most part, the difficulty with it was with the vines, and that was the reason for the stop motion being considered for a few scenes. The final form of Biollante was even more difficult with its vine network, taking hours to rig up and nearly took 32 people to operate. Godzilla in this movie took on a new design too, which is by far one of my favorite ways he has looked. He looks more animal and less cartoony. I love the design that they had in the previous film, but this just looks so much better and it fits the tone of the movie more.
The tone of the movie, too, is one of my favorites. It has a solid mix of both goofy and serious. 1 minute we're in a serious fight to the BioWars soundtrack. It's fun all the way through. There's nothing that I can really complain about in this movie. I overall think it's well paced. There's a solid story here while you're not getting bored of the human characters. In fact, if you replace Godzilla in this movie with a generic other kaiju or like someone like Gamera, oh, Gamera, we'll come to you eventually. You still have a good movie here. Just to sum up the movie real quickly, after Godzilla was trapped in Mount Mahara, some of Godzilla's cells were discovered and are delivered to a research lab in Saradia. They want to merge Godzilla's cells with that of a plant to hopefully create a grain that can be planted in the desert. I would have loved to see that pitch.
You want a what?
A terrorist, however, bombs the building and kills a scientist's daughter. We flash forward 5 years and Dr. Shiragami has become a shallow, hollow version of himself. He's always depressed looking and has lost his mind because he merged some of his daughter's cells with that of some roses. I love Dr. Shiragami here. He's played by actor Koji Takahashi and does an excellent job. You feel the life is just sucked out of him, and now he basically shows no emotion whatsoever, even with something that would spur something like that. Basically, he gets back a hold of the Godzilla cells after agreeing to use them to create an anti-nuclear energy bacteria to kill Godzilla should he ever return. Spoilers, he does. I always get this goofy smile when a scene like this always happens. The music booming, Godzilla's roar to the excellent physical explosions. This is pure Godzilla. During this, Dr. Shiragami merges some of the Godzilla cells with that of the rose to see if he could create an immortal plant to preserve Erica's soul. Instead, he created the plant monster, Biollante. I have always loved the buildup of Biollante in this movie, especially when it's growing. It's horrific with some weird, freaky music. The plant escapes into a nearby lake where it has grown into a kaiju-sized monster. This is horrifying. I love every aspect of the first form of Biollante, and I like it better than the second form. A fight goes down with Godzilla blowing up Biollante, but it's revealed that she's immortal and her spores fly up into space. Throughout the entire movie, however, there's this character named Miki Sagusa who has psychic abilities and can sense things like Godzilla